on a Friday, a feel-good, good for the heart Friday, by the way, courtesy of Franciscan Health. Got a fun story at 2:30 that I will relay. Kind of one of those fun stories where sports history meets sports present. And to an extent, a triumphant return revenge story. Redemption story, maybe is a better way to say it, which I like. But I have a confession to make, and that is the following. I like roller coasters. Haven't been on one in quite some time. Last time I went on one was in Edmonton, Alberta, Canada, in the world's largest shopping mall, at least it was at that time. And I was there for an IndyCar race. This would have been probably 15 years ago. And I thought, oh, they got a big, huge roller coaster in the middle of this mall. I'll do that because I'm in Edmonton, Alberta, and I don't know what else there is to do around here. I already tried to find Wayne Gretzky's house. Now I'm in the mall, and I'm going to ride a roller coaster. So I get on this roller coaster, and it goes down the first hill, and I thought, holy cow. I used to love these things, and then I read afterwards that after a certain age, your center of gravity is such that roller coasters are a bit of a doozy. But I still like them. You just feel them a little bit more. But I like roller coasters when I'm riding in them. I get tired of them a little bit when it comes to trying to follow storylines. For example, election years. It becomes a roller coaster, right? I mean, it's like a tennis match. Momentum this way, momentum that way. Numbers up after this event, numbers down after that event. And after a while, you're like, okay. But yet we still get enticed by it. We still want to know. The stock market the same way. Holy cow. Go out right now and start building a bunker in your backyard. And then the next day it's like, man, I'm going to retire in 6 months. It's the greatest thing ever. Life sometimes is a roller coaster. And it's best probably accepted when you just know that going in. But my confession is the one roller coaster ride that I have had to temper myself the most on, that I've had to most wean myself from getting too involved in, is the roller coaster of trying to monitor every single throw that a quarterback makes when wearing golf shorts and a T-shirt, not literally, in training camp, or being protected where players can't even hit them, etc., and trying to assess whether or not they are the next Peyton Manning, the next Tom Brady, or the next Joey Harrington, the next Achilles Smith. Who knows? Based on numbers from preseason. Anthony Richardson apparently yesterday, and then actually yesterday, the day off. Today, Laiatu Latu was all in his grill the entire time as he's the next coming of Lawrence Taylor, and Anthony Richardson 8 for 13. 3 touchdowns, 2 interceptions in camp. You look at that and you go, holy cow. Yesterday, well, he's at 70% during camp. The yin and the yang, the up and the down, to me, is the kind of thing that you want to see progression, don't get me wrong, but I just don't think, Jimmy, that we could sit here day by day and overly emphasize and get too involved. There's a danger in getting too involved in freaking out with every single pass and every single drive and whatever else. More than anything else, you don't know what they're working on. I know that sounds crazy, like I'm making an excuse for a guy, but you have no idea what they're being told to work on. You may look at it and say, oh my gosh, he just completely missed Josh Downs. Holy cow. Anthony Richardson, I was at camp, and he dropped back, and Josh Downs was wide open, and he didn't see him, and instead he threw a little bit low to Jelani Woods. Now, for all you know, they were saying, we're doing nothing but tight end flare passes right here. Like, don't look anywhere else. Go through your progressions and then get used to see how long it takes your eyes to adjust to finding the tight end. That's what we're working on. You just don't know. But either way, I made it a pact to myself. Yes, I'm going to tell people Anthony Richardson stats day by day, but I'm going to try not to get sucked in by the roller coaster.
Well, I'm glad you started with a confession. I will start with a real peek behind the curtain here. For players of all makes, be it 10-year veterans, be it rookies, training camp's not a measurable thing. It's an area where mistakes are supposed to be made. I would rather see large-scale struggles for most of camp than I would just outright unabashed success, because you don't know whether or not the success is based on the fact that there's a weak position group on the other side of the ball, or the success is really warranted. I bring that up because Latu winds up having a great day today. Is that because he is everything they think he's going to be, or because it was a bad day in the trenches for the offensive line? Same thing could be said for Blackman having an interception on Anthony Richardson. Is that because it was a bad throw by Anthony Richardson, or is it just the progression of Julian Blackman and he's going to be, another successful high-level Colt this year? Training camp is great. We're going to be out there on Monday. I love everything about what Graham Park and that partnership with the Colts does. The fan experience is awesome, and it is the initial drip on the drug of the NFL season, knowing that it is finally around the corner and we don't have to worry about figuring if it's a golf event that you're just throwing on to get a sports fix, or you've clung to the European Soccer Championships like I did in June. Football is back. It is here, and it's a great element of American sports lexicon. But camp is not the place to make your be-all, end-all decisions or evaluations on what a player is going to be, especially a quarterback that is in a de facto rookie campaign where you have next to no body of work on what he's actually going to be in the NFL. If we get through the first 5-6 weeks of the season, and Jake, you're still tracking, it's easier to do because it's in a box score form there, but you're still tracking how he looks, and he's like, 8 for 20 on a consistent basis, or he's missing reads, or whatever. Latu's not getting any penetration, or A.D. Mitchell or Alec Pierce are dropping balls. Okay, then you start to get concerned because they're games that matter, and because you're wanting to see step by step. You'd love a team to go undefeated, but from a natural progression standpoint, you want to see a different team week 1 than what you see week 18. In training camp, it's so condensed and everything's so raw that if you spend time just solely focusing on, Anthony Richardson, 8 for 13 today, 13 for 13 this day, 2 for 6 on Wednesday, what's happening here?
Right.
Those are all fake numbers. You're going to drive yourself insane.
That's what I mean. You can't get caught up in the roller coaster, right?
No.
Now, I also have a question of being I'm confused by back and why they...
Football is life.
I'm going to be the old guy here. You ready?
Why did Danny Rojas make an appearance?
Because you said football is back.
I did. You're right. Okay. It was just followed up by the old man, and I was confused.
Here's my question on the new kickoff rule, which we saw yesterday in the Hall of Fame game. And by the way,
yes, Grandpa Jake.
Good afternoon to you. Thank you, Eddie. My name is Jake Query, Grandpa Jake, I guess, for a second here. It is Query and Company here on 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan. Eddie Garrison, the voice you just heard, Jimmy Cook here as well. So the new kickoff rule, and I do understand it. The NFL, again, there's a hypocrisy here. Okay? I understand what they're trying to do at Spirit, but there's a hypocrisy here. They have the new kickoff rule where the kicker is kicking off from essentially the same spot, but his teammates, if you will, the kickoff team, are lined up further down the field directly across from, not directly, but what is there, a 5-yard gap or a 10-yard gap between the two?
Yeah, basically
the
5
receiving
yards.
team,
Yep.
Okay? And then once the receiving team receives the ball, then they're allowed to go into motion. This obviously is designed to limit the full-speed collision that would take place during kickoffs and returns. And I understand it. And, Bill Polian's famous quote, one of my favorite quotes that he ever said is, this is not a contact sport, it's a collision sport. And this all goes back to, if you look back to, and I never know what decade to call this, the 2000 single digits, so 2000 to 2010, what do we call that decade?
The 2Ks, I guess.
Okay,
I don't know.
The 2Ks.
Pop
so
2K is the channel on Sirius. So we'll go with that.
2005, 2006, and then really getting a groundswell into 2007 is when we started.
The O's?
The O's, yeah. You started getting a lot more conversation, a lot more awareness, a lot more conscientiousness, all kind of redundant, about concussions and head injuries within the game of football. And I don't need to sit here and go through all of it with people because but it started with I believe it was Dave Dewerson. I believe he was the Bear that is from Central Indiana that took his own life. And people were like, oh, my gosh. And, CTE. And then that led into, in later years, Junior Seau. But other stories, players finally started to have the courage. The stigma was gone to be able to come out of the woodwork and talk about the different challenges they were having neurologically because of presumably playing football. So over the course of a decade and a half, there have been more measures taken. This is one of those, and I understand it. But at the same time, as I've mentioned a couple of different times, it was 2 or 3 years ago in the practices when I saw them wearing the additional padding on top of their helmet. And I'm like, what's that for? And they said, well, that reduces concussion chances by like 40%. Wonderful. The league is, because the NFL has committed to and is showing us that they are willing to do anything they have to protect their players. Like, for example, I heard they're even going to change the kickoffs and the way that they line up for kickoffs because they realized that was where the most collisions were taking place and the highest percentage, perhaps, of opportunity for concussion took when two guys were coming at each other at full speed velocity straight on with the 20-yard head of steam, and the NFL said, we've got to do everything we can in our power to reduce the likelihood or possibility of these head injuries, so we are altering the way that we do those plays. Oh, that's excellent. Now, what about – so then you should put on these pads because we know that that's an additional 40% right there. Well, but the problem is we make a lot of money off of the way the helmets look and the logos on the side and everything else. I'm not saying that's the thought process, and I know that they can say, well, we're still looking at it. But if they're looking at it and they're not certain that makes a difference, then why are they having them all wear in practice? But anyway, I digress.
I will add something to that, Jake. The Chargers have implemented a style in which it's the same as their helmet. So it doesn't
I would
appear.
assume so it looks like the logo, right? I mean,
yeah.
I would assume that's the way that they're all eventually going to go. But you would think, my point being, if you're willing to go to the measure of altering the style of play as we know it, you would go to every measure. But I digress. In terms of the kickoff, and I'm going to – this is what I said when I said I'm going to be the old guy that doesn't understand and is raising my hand in school, okay? Because it's August now, so we're all back in school. So I'm in school, and I'm in the back of the room, and I'm waving my hand, and the teacher's going to call on me and say, do you have a question? And I'm going to say, I do have a question. Okay, Mr. Query, what's your question? My question is, and maybe I missed this, and maybe I should know it, and maybe I'm erring in my responsibilities as a talk show host in an NFL city, but I can't be the only one, so I'm willing to stand up and, take the criticism here for asking this in front of the class. Does this mean that onside kicks are just a done deal? You can no longer onside kick?
I appreciate you asking that question, but no, I got to be the old man here because I don't know the answer to that question either, Jake.
Eddie, do you know?
I don't know.
Because if the kicker is lined up some 30 yards or whatever behind everyone else, so all he's got to do, the kicker literally has time to kick the ball, run over, get a hot dog, high-five the coach, ball's spinning around. It's like when McAfee got his own onside kick, and he just ran out before everybody else and fell on it. Jimmy, you have an answer, it appears.
So this is from a CBS Sports article from 3 days ago. Teams will still be able to attempt an onside kick, but there will be special rules in place for that. Teams can only attempt an onside kick in the fourth quarter. A team can only attempt an onside kick if they're losing, which I guess kind of makes sense unless you're no more Sean Payton at halftime of the Super Bowl.
So my question is this. Part of the beauty of the onside kick was that nobody knew whether or not, even though obviously once the kicker kind of lines over to the side, it's pretty obvious what's happening, but there still was the possibility of doing a sneak onside kick. Do you now have to basically say ahead of time, by the way, we're doing our onside kick, so everybody has to come up here now?
That part I don't know. I would guess so, but you can only do it in the fourth quarter, and you can only do it when you're down. So,
well, what I'm saying is,
you may have to attempt it as well. I don't think it's one of those things where it's like, oh, we're going to do this.
But
and
what
then
I'm
not
saying to you is this: clearly, you have to turn in a card ahead of time saying we are getting ready to attempt an onside kick, so that they can bring the two lines up onto the ball. Otherwise, an onside kick is recovered by the kicking team. Wait for it, 100% of the time. And in the variation where it is right now, there's no way that they would have that as an onside kick, because you would have to declare it ahead of time and have everybody then set up for the initial form of the onside kick.
None
right?
of the language directly says that, but all the quotes from coaches commenting on the change in onside kick acknowledge the fact that the surprise onside kick, being like what Sean Payton did to the Colts in the Super Bowl, the Jaguars were the last team to do it. They did it against Kansas City a couple years ago. An onside kick to start the game or to occur at halftime, those are all gone away, to the point that all the language from coaches, Jake, is saying the surprise kick is gone, meaning that there must be some type of indication to the opposing team what's happening.
I want to be very clear when I say this, in the fact that I understand why changes are coming about. I get it. I don't poo-poo the NFL for it. I understand it. I totally get it. However, this would be my one, and I'll say concern for lack of a better phrase, caution. This would be my one caution. Back in those times that I'm talking about, 2007, 2008, around the time that the NFL was starting to really become aware of CTE and those things, a sport that having nothing to do with that, and the NFL's always been the 800-pound gorilla. It took a dip there and lost like 2 pounds, and then it gained them back. It's still the 800-pound gorilla. But around 2007, 2008, the absolute zenith sport in America that not named NFL was probably NASCAR. Maybe more like 99 to 2002, up to like the Dale Earnhardt passing. I mean, there were a lot of things that happened here. But NASCAR was everywhere. I remember my cousin saying to me 25 years ago for Christmas, he's like, just anything you can get me having to do with Mark Martin. I'm a big fan of him and scanners, that kind of thing. And I'm like, I never even knew my cousin liked NASCAR. But everybody loved it. And people followed it, and people went to races and everything else. Now, there's a number of things that went into the decline of NASCAR's popularity. A number of things, and I've gone over those before. I mean, the changing of tracks that they were running, the changing of cars they were running. But a big part, and I can tell you as somebody that works in racing, when people come up to me and talk about their dip in their passion for NASCAR, one of the factors that is often mentioned to me is it got to the point where they had so many rule changes that it became difficult for me to understand what was going on. I couldn't follow all the rules. You got stage racing and then green, white checkers, and they were like, there were so, and then the points championship, you had this playoff system, and the old playoff system, Dale Earnhardt, the way it is now, would have won 9 championships, and I can't keep track now of who's eliminated and who's around. And there were so many nuanced things that what you took was a sport that appealed to the general masses, and you kept narrowing it down to more and more esoteric, to the point where then only the true, at its core, original diehards were going to take the time to learn everything to stay with it. And it whittled down the transcendent audience for NASCAR to the point where it now is not necessarily a niche sport, but it is not where it was 20 years ago. There are other factors, I realize. Now, in the NFL, it is the 800-pound gorilla. I'm not saying that this is going to be an immediate impact on the NFL. And I understand why they're doing the changes they're doing.
I mean, they had to.
Understood. But the one cautionary tale is the more that you start to deviate from your baseline way of doing things, and the more that you start to tinker with, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And again, I understand that in some ways it was broke. But the NFL over the course of time, and Jimmy, it doesn't happen in immediacy. But over the course of time, the more you start to tweak things, the more you run the risk of people saying it just doesn't resemble what it was that I first fell in love with.
I don't disagree with that sentiment, Jake, and I think it's a fair cautionary tale. But that area, when you and I have had conversations like this in the past, focuses more on like the hip drop tackle that they've put into place now where you can't do that anymore, does that make it even harder for defenders to actually make tackles, and does that ruin that aspect of the game? That would be a fear where I'd be like, well, maybe this is totally unrecognizable to the sport that NFL fans, casual or otherwise, were watching 5 to 10 years ago. With this, and I don't have the racing background, so I don't have the equivalent of how to explain this to the audience, but a year ago, and it had been a downward trend for the last decade, but 22% of all kickoffs, doesn't matter when they happened, 22% of all kickoffs were run back. It was an all-time low for the NFL, meaning for the most part, it was just a ceremonial aspect of the game. It didn't matter anymore. And they brought this up on the NFL coverage last night. I think it was Jason Kelsey that did it. Like, you have a guy going into the Hall of Fame in Devin Hester, the greatest returner of all time, and what he's going into the Hall of Fame for doesn't exist anymore because of the safety elements and being so, which I'm fine with, by the way. I'm all for trying to make that game as safe as possible. We could spend an entire month on CTE studies and the impact that this game has had on the athletes that are just left behind after they're done playing. So I get why kickoffs became an afterthought, but it was an exciting, electric play, admittedly. Whether it's Devin Hester, whether it's Dante Hall from my roots, there are aspects of kick returns that were so cool. And additionally, if you had a dream of playing in the NFL, maybe you weren't going to play as a starter, but boy, if you found a niche in special teams, you could get a spot on a roster. It had been a dead play that admittedly, I get what you're saying. Like, it had an aspect of, as old as the sport itself, oh, this is how the kickoff looks, and this is what we're used to, and this is what we're accustomed to. But if it's just a ceremonial play, we were getting to a point where there was legit conversation about, why don't they just put the ball at the 20 and be done with it and don't have any aspect of kicking the ball off? And maybe that's what happens if this gets the mixed to negative reviews that it got last night. Maybe they do totally wind up doing away with it altogether. But it was something that needed to change because it was like your point about falling into an area of the sport's unrecognizable and alienating fans that way is a fair one. But with this particular rule, it didn't look like what mom and dad's kickoff looked like anymore.
I get it.
Because
it's totally different,
because
right?
it was just touchbacks.
But
touchbacks.
to your point, and again, alienating is probably a wrong word, Jimmy, but there was a time, and I get it, different era. I totally get it. But there was a time when the NFL, the old NFL films music?
Dun, 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 dun. Yeah, sure.
I mean, any of them, right? They have 100 different ones from
yep.
Steve Sable and the gang.
Yep.
Any of those songs and the dulcet tones of John Facenda coming in, talking about, the frozen tundra of Lambeau Field and all of that, right? When I was a kid, and for most people listening, when they fell in love with football, the NFL Films did specials that ran like year-round of nothing but like NFL's greatest hits and crunches. And it was nothing but videos of guys getting helicoptered and lambasted and tattooed and decapitated. And it was
Jacked
like
clotheslined.
This is the greatest thing ever.
Jacked Up was a segment for most of mine and Eddie's childhood on NFL Primetime where we celebrated crazy decapitating like hits. Yes.
And so that was the element of it's very similar to like in racing. And one of the great lines of all time is Paul Page talking about the Indy 500 saying, without that danger, the men are just ordinary. In the NFL, to a great extent, and this is the catch-22 of the sport, the fact that without that bone-crunching, holy cow, did you hear the pad pop right there on that guy hit, it's just another sport. But at the same time, I understand 100% and applaud the fact that you also have to take into consideration the health long-term of the competitors. I mean, I remember when Austin Collie was laying on the field and his Tua-like with his arms up, straight up, and I remember almost hesitating to push send on a tweet that said he has to retire now. And he didn't. He still came back and played. But there is a perversion with us as a society of wanting to see the dynamic lambasting hits. But at the same time, we are aware of the reasoning. It's a very, very yin and yang fascination. The kickoff, to be honest with you, rule last night, when I watched it, and I went back today and looked at it and watched it, I think you'll get used to it pretty quickly, to be honest with you. The onside kick and the fact that when somebody does onside now, there is no more surprise element to it is a very small wrinkle that's taken away that always kind of made the game intriguing. It was one of the aspects of an intrigue with the game.
Now, if you have any questions on if it's a rainy or windy day and the ball falls off the tee twice, no, there is no longer somebody holding the football. It goes to the kicking stick, and the official has to go pick it up.
It goes to the kicking stick?
Yes. You know, like those tees that they practice on?
Right.
They call them kicking sticks in the NFL rules. So if
Well,
the ball falls off the tee twice, then that will come out instead of the tee.
So there's not a little dude that comes out and holds it.
Correct.
I always thought, to be honest with you, that one of the more underrated jobs in the NFL is holder. And I realize it's usually your backup quarterback.
Sure.
But I think holder, think about
Steven?
Well, especially in field goal
That too.
situations. I've always feared
That's what
for
I
those
mean.
guys because it's like you always say, laces
If it's-
out, and then,
well, think about this. It's 8 below 0. You're playing in Arrowhead AFC playoffs. It's 8 degrees below 0. You know what it's like when it's that cold outside. You're getting in your car and you accidentally ding your hand against your door, and you're like, oh, your bones are brittle, right?
Yeah.
So now, not only are you sitting there,
Got a cinder block coming your way.
but you've got exactly a guy is throwing a cinder block to you underhand with maximum velocity. You've got to hold it, and then your finger, which you now cannot feel other than the fact it feels like it just got shattered into 100 pieces, you've got to use that to then spin a ball around with your other hand, if you can still feel it, mind you, and you've got a guy coming that with his right foot, presumably in most cases, is going to swing through, and there's a chance he might kick your wrist. I don't know about you, but I'd be sitting there the whole time like, what are we doing?
You know what else I'm fascinated with this rule change is, like, if there is a penalty on a touchdown, like an unsportsmanlike conduct, and they enforce it on the kickoff, you're kicking from the 50, and if the ball goes through the end zone in the air, you go out to the 30 now, but if it bounces within the quote-unquote landing zone and into the end zone, then it goes out to the 25, I think, or the 20.
I can say this now because I'm an official, excellent golfer, because I've now played, 6 rounds of golf. It's kind of like teeing off from the par 3 as opposed to a par 5, right?
Yeah.
You got to temper the way that you're actually making contact with the ball.
You're
and
not
change
pulling out
things
the
a little bit,
driver
right?
there. You go with an 8-iron.
But did you watch the game last night itself?
I watched the first couple drives, and I was glad as it ends up ending in a weather delay that I did not invest the whole evening around it. But I saw enough to see the first couple of drives. You knew it was going to be heavy backups across the board for both teams. I got to see a little bit of the kickoff rules as we discussed. I'm not mad at the NFL for trying something new with a play that was already dead, but I would be probably towards the mixed critic side of the ledger after last night. I was expecting, and this is very dumb of me, admittedly, I was hoping somewhere we would get in the first couple of tries with that a mistake that was made by one of the two teams where you'd see a house call. Like, because of all the hype around that, I realized I set a bar too high, but I was really hoping, okay, new kickoff rules, we're going to get a house call on opening night of preseason, and we didn't get it. We got, players that were lucky to get back to the 35 or the 40.
It's impressive, though, because of you would anticipate, Jimmy, to your point, and maybe Chicago and Houston worked on this in camp so far more than the others because they knew they had a game. I don't know.
I was also rooting for people not to have done that. I was hoping they were going to be unprepared. And
well,
so
that's what I mean. That's what I mean. So there was a discipline there, though, where when the ball was kicked and they're all waiting for the receiver to catch the ball, and then they get moving. That it was in that regard, it's pretty impressive.
Yes,
the way that they were able to all have an awareness of, just what's going on, whatever else. I mean, it was a pretty seamless transition in that regard.
I want to flip on red zone week 1 and see at least one kick return for a touchdown via this new system. Like, I'd love nothing more than to see that.
Well, it almost looks like it would be easier, though, because the line that you need to get past, the barrier you need to get past, is much more condensed now.
Right.
If you can break your way through that first grouping, You're home free. It's not the defense or the field is not as spread out as it was in the previous situation. But I am convinced of this. You always hear of the football gods, right? Well, the football gods paid that team back. Or, boy, I'll tell you what, they were down 2 and they sat up and it was a perfect field goal and they had a questionable call that went their way in the first half and the football gods paid it even because that field goal hooked left. You hear about the football gods all the time. There is something in football that I think is pretty cool, that I think is a bucket list thing for most people, that is a bucket list item in title but not necessarily in execution of it because it's quite truthfully somewhat disappointing, but it's something I think everybody should do. I've done it. Jimmy, I think you've done it. But I'm convinced the football gods no longer want players doing it. I'm convinced of it. Last night, the football gods again spoke and sent a cautionary tale and has nothing to do with rule changes or what happened. But there is one clear thing that the football gods in the NFL do not like. I'll tell you what that is. Kevin Bowen joins us 2 o'clock. I'll tell you that next. And then Good for the Heart Friday in the 2 o'clock segment as well. Query and Company here, 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan. Is this your vote, Eddie?
No.
Today's banned question on X, Twitter, whatever you want to call it, that I asked, which of the following 4 songs of the 4 listed is the best out of the Beastie Boys? And I went with that one, Intergalactic, also Sabotage, which was played every other video in 1994 when I was an intern at MTV Music Television, Viacom Industries. The other 2 that I selected, I believe, were Fight for Your Right to Party and Paul Revere.
I'm in second place right now.
There are a lot, and I get it, there are a lot. Thanks to Pat Dyer, by the way. Pat's a good dude. He runs the bar that is just across from the movie theater in the Fashion Mall, and is a loyal listener to the program. He submitted to me some different artists that he thought would be good for this survey and poll that we do, and Beastie Boys was his suggestion. I thought that's pretty good, so we went with the Beastie Boys. In terms of the National Football League and the football gods, I think there are probably a number of people out there, I can't be alone in this, that a couple of years ago, what year was it where the Colts were in the Hall of Fame game? I'm assuming it would have been the year when either when Peyton Manning was inducted or the year that Marvin and Tony Dungy were inducted, right?
Sounds right.
So we're looking at, and I'm looking up the exact year here.
20-something. It popped up as 2024. I was like, yeah, that's not right.
You're right. It did come up as 2024. I want to say
2021.
2021. Okay. The 2021 NFL Hall of Fame game.
2016, I was way off.
Yeah, you're right. August 7th of 2016.
Yeah. Packers. I remember that.
The Packers and Colts, right? That has to be, for most of us, the first time that we had ever heard the word congealing. Kind of like fragile. Congealing. So everybody turns it on. They're excited to watch the Colts and the Packers, right? The Jeff Saturday game. The 2 teams Jeff Saturday played for. Playing in the Hall of Fame game. Hallelujah. Football's back. Hall of Fame game. Let's watch.
You could have said Sega Baba. That would have been appropriate, too.
Nobody says that. And so everybody's standing around, and they're like, there's an issue right now with the fact that the paint on the field is congealing and rubberized. What? They have a turf where it is. I still don't know what congealing means. Is that the same as coagulating? I don't even know. But the game itself was canceled due to concerns on the field. This year, you have a Hall of Fame game, and it seems to get earlier every year. Now, I realized that year I said it was August 7th. It seems, before we know it, it's going to be like 4th of July, Joey Chestnut back eating hot dogs on Thursday, Hall of Fame game on Friday. That's what it feels like it's going to be. But now the Hall of Fame game, last night.
Did you know, by the way, and I was waiting because I wanted to make sure I wasn't undercutting the segment again, in the research about the Packers-Colts Hall of Fame game, did you know that they reached a settlement last year with people that had tickets for that game, the NFL did?
Well, I'm glad they were on that in a timely fashion.
It only took 7 years.
Well, what were people holding out for? You know what it was?
$750,000 to people that had tickets to the game, and they also would settle on airfare and stuff if you did not already get reimbursement from the Pro Football Hall of Fame. The settlement was last year per the Indy Star.
Wait a minute. You're saying $750 to be divvied up?
Yeah. $750,000 to be divvied up. Yes.
So what do you got, like?
Is this like the NFL draft where Jake and I were in attendance? Can we get some of that?
That's right. That's exactly right.
If you were part of their
yeah,
count.
we got the email. We should check our email and see. I might have been because I covered that Hall of Fame that year. But
they would cover ticket costs up to a maximum of $250 per ticket, airfare and travel up to $600 per ticket, lodging up to per person, lodging up to $289 per night. Then you got some mileage reimbursement.
What about the interest on your credit card that's been sitting there for 7 years while you waited to pay it? Okay, but at any rate, last night I tune in and I'm looking to see. I'm curious to see. You know, like you said, I mean, no real starters. You don't really get a feel. It's not like Caleb Williams is playing. It's not like C.J. Stroud's playing.
Troy Aikman was mad about that. But he was very mad about no Caleb Williams.
Yeah, I mean, I think people wanted to see him, right?
Yeah.
But I turn it on and I'm like, suspended. I mean, look, I've been suspended. I know about suspended. I was suspended from all 3 schools at Washington Township that I attended. But the game is suspended, the Hall of Fame game, and I've just come to the conclusion that the football gods, when it comes to the Hall of Fame game, are like enough. I know that you're playing on a field in Canton, and I do understand, but you don't see Major League Baseball doesn't have an exhibition game on a regular in Cooperstown, right? Does the NBA have games? Do they play games in Springfield? I'm not sure. The Hall of Fame itself, the Hall of Fame game is very representative of the Hall of Fame. The Hall of Fame game you get super excited for as a football fan. The buildup is cool because, not for the game, but because football is back. Teams are back in camp. Teams are reporting. You have video in your local news of guys walking into camp and doing, taking in helicopters and whatever else. And we are talking about it on the radio, and Kevin and Andy in the morning are giving you updates daily. And it's a tremendous buildup and excitement. And the Hall of Fame game allows the American culture to know football is back, baby. So there's a lot of excitement for that.
Life.
But then the game happens and you go, this is kind of a dud. Either the field is congealing or rubberizing, or the Mother Nature has intervened and there's a rainstorm. And now what I'm looking at is basically a glorified high school football field in Canton, Ohio, with people sitting around waiting it out. And I'm glad that we got super excited for this, but I don't even know who these guys playing are. That is actually fairly representative and symbolic of the Football Hall of Fame, the Pro Football Hall of Fame. Because if you ever have gone to the Pro Football Hall of Fame, first off, when you drive there, it feels like you're in the vicinity of Canton for like 45 minutes because you have all these little towns, and it's a cool area. But you get out of, you go up through Columbus, and then you're starting to take 32 across, and you go through Orville, and you're like, oh, Bob Knight's hometown, and you go through Massillon, and you're like, oh, my gosh, like Chris Spielman's from there, and this is like the football mecca of high school football in America. And then you start seeing the signs for Akron, and you're like, I'm getting near Cleveland and Canton. There's all these little towns around, and you finally get, and you kind of have a hard time getting your bearings on which town you're in. And then you get to Canton, and you see the football-looking dome dealio, right? And you're like, here I am. Here I am. And you pay your money, and you go in, and there's like this hallway you walk down, and it's got murals painted on the side of Fran Tarkenton and Barry Sanders and Dick Butkus and great legend and Vince Lombardi. What the hell's going on out there? You can hear all of it, right, as you're walking down the hallway. And then you walk in. You hear it. You're in the shrine room. And alas, your journey's been paid off, and you're there. And you're looking in the shrine room, and there are all the busts, and it is impressive. Not near as big as you think it'd be, but it's impressive. And you can go through, and they got touch screens where you can see the players by position or by hometown or by birth city or by college or by football team of designation, and it's wonderful.
Do you imagine any day but Hall of Fame game day is the best time to go to Canton? For example, if you're not wanting to make it look like a field trip day where there's thousands of people there, do you think that's just for today, or do you think year-round it is packed to the brim because people want to make this pilgrimage?
I think it's an excellent question. I mean, clearly this weekend would be, and it's a whole thing, right? I mean, they have it roped off and buses going in and out from different areas. But I think other than that, then it's just people. It's like the Speedway Museum. It's people that you see and you're like
a Tuesday in December.
I think a Tuesday in December, what you probably have are people that are diehard fans of the Buffalo Bills that live in Dayton, Ohio, and are driving to Buffalo, so they go through and stop because it's on the way. Or somebody that their kid is taking a look at Baldwin Wallace University in Cleveland, so they go out of their way to go to Canton because they live in Augusta, Maine, or Savannah, Georgia, or whatever. So I think it does get sporadic. I mean, I'm sure it's always busy, and they have a huge – I don't know if you've been to it.
I've not. That's what I was asking.
They have an unbelievable NFL gift shop in it. But the point I was going to make is the shrine room itself is amazing, right? And you go through it, but you're in the shrine room for 15 minutes, 20 minutes. And then you're like, oh, that was the first, that's the first room that you go in. Then you have the rest of the Hall of Fame before you, and it essentially It essentially is like a 1970s Howard Johnson lobby of football displays of just random stuff, because it's not the NFL Hall of Fame. It's the Pro Football Hall of Fame. So you turn the corner and you're like, what in the world is this? And you're like, the uniform designs of the Arizona Independent League of the 1930s were the first to use chin straps. Here are the 19 different displays of the Arizona Independent League Roadrunners. And you're like,
I thought
okay.
you only voiced the Speedway. I didn't know you also voiced
right.
the Hall of Fame. I didn't know
That's right.
it was a contract of traveling affairs.
But the rest of it is a letdown, quite frankly. And that's exactly what the Hall of Fame game is. It's this incredible crescendo and buildup and excitement about the fact that football's back, and it feels like football, and it looks like football, and you get there, and the broadcast team and everything else, and then the game begins, and after all of the buildup, which is the hallway walking down and the crescendo and the voices and John Facenda and Lombardi, and then you go into the Shrine Room, and then the other 90% of the trip is like, really? And it ends pretty well, because at the very end is when you go into the gift shop, and that's cool because you can buy literally every single team that's in there. And I think I told you, I asked, here's a good trivia question for you, Jimmy and Eddie. The last time that I was there, which would have been in 2016, I asked the employees of the gift shop. So you got to shoot me straight right now. You are the gift shop in the Pro Football Hall of Fame. I want to know, what team do you sell the most?
Oh.
And what team do you sell the least? There was a tie for least, and there was a clear-cut, without hesitation answer for most. However, open disclaimer, I told them that you could not use the Cleveland Browns as an answer, because it's essentially in. I mean, anybody that goes there that is of local is going to be buying Cleveland Brown stuff, because you're like, I don't know, 20 minutes from the Cleveland Brown Stadium. But they were like, undoubted two answers. The least and the most. And there were several employees. I asked this question a lot of places, by the way. There are several employees at the store, and I think there were 4 or 5 people that were working when I was having this conversation with them.
What year was this?
2016, although year is somewhat irrelevant.
Are we guessing on the other side?
Well, let me go on to say this.
Okay.
So, for whatever reason, when I go to different places and I walk up and I start asking questions, people that I'm with usually are like, "Oh my gosh, this is so embarrassing," and 9 times out of 10, and 1 time out of 10, the person that I ask says that's really embarrassing and weird. 9 times out of 10, what I have found is that if you express an interest in something that other people are doing, they are more than eager to sit and talk to you about it. I've always told young people, if you're graduating from high school or college, I always tell young people this: put yourself in a position in life where if you walk into a room with 200 people, you are far better served to be able to talk to all 200 people about their favorite subject for 2 minutes than to go into the room and talk about your favorite subject for 400 minutes. If you can do the first one, you're going to go a lot farther in life, because people are going to be engaged by the fact that you are talking about something that is relevant to their life. So for whatever reason, when I go up to people, one of the things that I've been most excited about or enjoyed in my life is that, like, usually I get in these long conversations that become fairly fascinating. This was one of them. So I walked up and I said, and there were like 5 of them sitting around, you know, they're going over schedules for the weekend, and one of them's asking if he can go take a smoke break and whatever else. And I say, "Hey guys, I got a question for you." And I asked him that question. And I'm telling you, without hesitation, every one of them immediately, as if they had rehearsed it in some sort of like a choir, boom, they had the answer for most popular. And then they kind of for a second discussed amongst themselves and said, "Yeah, no, you're right. Yeah, you're right. Yeah, no, yeah, you're right. Yeah, no, Bill, no, we were just talking to Angie about that yesterday. Yeah, you're right." And then they turned around and said, "Okay, the answer for the least is a tie." Okay? So, you are correct, Jimmy. Other side will tell you the answers. For either of the three franchises.
So for most popular, I will go with the Dallas Cowboys.
Okay. Jimmy?
You said 2016 was the trip. So I would say, because they would have been the most popular team of the modern era at that point, I would say the New England Patriots
Okay.
for most popular.
Most popular. Got to go with vicinity here. Pittsburgh Steelers.
Oh, yeah, good point.
Part of it's they're an America's team, and part of it is they are obviously close in proximity. Least popular. Eddie?
I was going to go with the St. Louis Rams, but with it being in the Midwest, I don't know. Seattle Seahawks?
You were close with Rams. Jimmy?
I'll go Titans.
No, the correct answer for least, and one of these surprised me. The one that immediately was answered was New York Jets.
For least?
For least.
Wow.
Then somebody else interjected, and they're like, ooh, and they went back and forth, and they're like, yeah, you're probably right. Second was I believe then, San Diego, now Los Angeles Chargers.
Mm-hmm.
Which is surprising because the Chargers have cool color and everything else, right?
Yeah, color scheme's nice. The powder blues are nice. The bolt's nice.
But last night in the game itself,
and with how many hypothetical division titles they've won over the last 15 years.
Hard to tell about the Houston Texans, who were curious to see what they're going to be. Hard to tell exactly what they're going to be this year based on last night, right?
Yeah, I mean, no Stroud, no starters really of consequence on either side of the ball for the most part. I mean, it's Jake, would you agree with the following? You mentioned at the top about how you're hesitant to judge stuff in training camp because it's not the framework to be judged. Like, you should make observations, and health monitoring is of the utmost importance, but you're not going to really know about a player sinking or swimming in the NFL until you get to the regular season. With that said, the NFL is clearly getting to a point where I think the next collective bargaining agreement, it would not surprise me if we were down to 2 preseason games. Maybe 1. Maybe they're gone altogether. Are we at a point yet where, especially for the Hall of Fame game, you can't make an observation any more than you could about training camp unless your job is, the only caveat to that is if your job on the coaching staff, be it the head coach, coordinators, whatever, is looking at the last 10 guys that are going to make the team. But in terms of like your top caliber guys, they're either only going to play the first couple drives or not at all. And there's not a ton to learn for those pieces. There's still pieces for cutdown day and a guy that might be fighting to make the roster, but it's been so watered down the preseason that there's not a ton of observations to be had.
I think part of the problem with the Hall of Fame game, truthfully, is it is too early in camp, because if you're either of those two teams, you don't even know what you have to work with yet, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you're basically like, okay, let's just go. I mean, how long ago did they report?
What,
you know what
weeks?
I mean?
1 week, 2 weeks?
Yeah, I mean, come on. So you're not getting any view. I get the fact that it almost feels like the Hall of Fame game to me almost feels anymore like when COVID happened and they were doing like in the racing world, because it was the summertime initially and everybody was thirsting for anything to watch. And so they're like, okay, we're going to get drivers to do virtual races. And you're going to watch it on television because you're at least going through, like, seeing something of competition of the people. It's kind of the same thing.
Horse during COVID was phenomenal. Do you remember when they had the NBA players in their basketball setups on Zoom just play horse?
Yeah.
Mike Conley won.
What a time.
I actually broadcasted. I guess I should put this on the top of my resume. I broadcasted virtual racing games. Yes.
Wow.
Like I went with, and I'm trying to think, I think at one point, like Katie Hargett might have been an analyst with me, like Charlie Kimball maybe, Anders Krohn maybe. I did 3 or 4. Ryan Marine did some as well. We alternated, but we went in and it was like, okay, and we had, on one of the video game systems, they had 8 IndyCar drivers or whatever, and we sat in different rooms and everybody in different places from around the world broadcasting a video game. It's a different time, right?
Yeah, totally different time.
Did you watch the Olympics last night?
So I've been cheating, right? Like I'm watching Gold Zone when I get home from work, or maybe occasionally monitoring stuff while we're
Wait, you
here
work?
at work. But thank you. So the prime time doesn't really do it for me this Olympic cycle. Like unless you are, and they do a phenomenal job. My wife loves the Olympics, as do I. We have watched some in the first 5, 6, 7 nights of the Olympics primetime coverage. Mike Tirico and company do an outstanding job. The way they condense everything and have it set up where you're getting nonstop action has been great, but you already know the results. And like, especially if you have an iPhone, good luck avoiding spoilers, let alone if you were listening today yesterday when JMP did it with Simone Biles. But I had that notification on my phone minutes after it happened. So this goes back to the conversation of why live sports are the most valuable entity to commercial advertising, because you don't know what's going to happen and you're not going to fast forward through those commercials because you're live and in the moment. I haven't watched as much on the recap of the nights. Most of what I've been watching is during the day. Did you sit down and watch any primetime last night?
I did not, because I turned it on and I saw, and then here's what's interesting. I turned it on. I saw that Simone Biles was competing. Then I went over to Peacock and they were showing the same thing, which was interesting to me. You would think that Peacock would be kind of the alternate thing and I knew what the results were. So we watched Biles' routine, and then I actually began a new show on a streaming service that just launched. Like, okay, let's pick a new show. And we picked a new show, watched the episode of it last night.
Good, bad?
It was good. It was called Eric. It's on
Okay.
Netflix. It was good.
Will you watch episode 2?
We'll watch episode 2, yeah.
All right.
So it got me in that regard. But back to the business at hand today, and that is Colts camp. We'll take a deeper dive into that because we're going to be there on Monday. What happened today? Who looked good? One continues to shine. We'll let you know about that in the 1 o'clock hour here on Query & Company. So Colts back in action on the practice field today. And it seems as though, again, a week of camp does not a season make. A season does not a career make. But it certainly beats the alternative. We have had it in the past where you've had players that you kind of were waiting to jumpstart. You're like, is so-and-so out there? I mean, Alec Pierce comes to mind, quite frankly. Or that get off to slow rookie starts. Hell, Dwight Freeney was one of them. Jimmy does not appear to be the case with Laiatu Latu because each time that the Colts are out on the practice field, seemingly he continues to impress. And I think it is just his quickness off the line, which is the reason why they drafted him. He was the first defensive player selected in the draft. But so far, it appears as though that is carrying over.
We talked about it at the top of the show. I view training camp as a cherry on top kind of exercise. If you're doing bad in camp, I mean, it depends the degree to which you're doing bad. But if you're doing bad in camp, especially if you're a rookie, I get it. I understand. It's a new level of competition. It's a new routine. You're trying to get used to so many changes in your life of now going from a collegiate athlete to a professional football player. So I'm willing to let it go and wait to judge you by week one. But by that same vein, if you happen to play great and you happen to live up to the hype that was talked about you when you were drafted already in camp, it's a great sign. I'm going to welcome it with open arms. And you've seen that throughout multiple examples now, but especially today, getting after Anthony Richardson multiple times, did Laiatu Latu, and he is going to have, I think, more expectations let me backtrack that. He's going to have more asked of him than I think initially anticipated when he was selected, given the Samson Ebukam injury. With him now off the board, there's going to be a need for a level of where's the impact going to come back from? Where's the game-changing, game-wrecking plays up front not named DeForest Buckner or not named Kwity Paye? And to be able to see early returns on Latu would give more confidence to a coaching staff of he's going to be able to handle a workload that's going to be larger perhaps week 1, week 2, week 4 than it would have been otherwise. The other positive sign from camp as well, Julian Blackman looking solid yet again, having a couple interceptions so far throughout camp. You're going to need your big-name players in the secondary, your Julian Blackman, your Juju Brents, your Kenny Moore, to stay status quo or better. You cannot afford to have setbacks from them when there's already so many question marks around this young secondary. So all in all, Jake, again, I know it's weird because we're just so excited to have football back, but you said this at the start of the show. You can make observations and you can make early judgment or see where early returns are on players. And certainly there are individuals that are fighting just to make the roster, that want to make an impact right away. And I commend that. That is my favorite part of training camp and preseason, is seeing guys in the margins find their spot on a team. But for the most part, if you're assured a job, if you know you're going to be the starting defensive end or the starting wide receiver or the starting quarterback, I just want you to stay healthy and get to week 1. That's really where my bar is at.
And it's hard to believe. I mean, they're almost halfway through. The camp has just gone. It's just different than it used to be, right? I mean, before you know it, they'll be back at the complex. Colts did practice indoors today because of inclement weather. According to various people, notably our Kevin Bowen, whose stuff you can read, of course, on the website, 1075thefan.com. He's going to join us at 2 o'clock. He was out there today to watch practice and report on it. Another guy, along with Latu, who continued to shine. A really good day today, apparently, for Julian Blackman, who had an interception, was athletic, was kind of all over the place. And that's interesting because the Colts have kind of created subliminally or sent the message of a perceived open competition in the defensive backfield. Nick Cross continues to get looks. That Blackman, I think, was always the guy that we thought was going to be there. He's been a special player when he's been healthy, which has been not all the time, obviously, during his time as a Colt. But I think maybe he got a little bit of a nudge, a little bit of a wake-up call with some of the different rotations they've done in practice, and then a good day today, which is, Jimmy, what you want to see, right?
I mean, I've stressed this throughout the entirety of the offseason. There are areas of this team, especially on the defensive end, that I have questions about. And I appreciate when we talked to Juju Brents earlier in the week, him pushing back against some of that. Look, I want it to be a narrative. I want the Colts to have an incredible campaign this year. Scott Van Pelt alluded to it last night when they were talking about the Texans and talking about the entirety of the AFC South. I believe there is a contingent of Colts fans, probably some of the front office of the Colts, that feel like the season that the Texans just experienced last year with C.J. Stroud and his Rookie of the Year campaign and them making the playoffs and winning the South and it coming down to that last game, the point that was really not lost, but the point of setback where the Colts were going to have to make up serious ground to be able to have that type of season was when Anthony Richardson goes down. And Gardner Minshew, of course, did far better than I ever anticipated he would be able to do over the course of the season to even put them in that position. And they had guys step up in different areas of need. Now this year, as you flash forward, some of my concerns were still there, which is why I bring up the Juju Brents of it all, of how young this secondary is. And without Ebukam, what do they do to make sure that his loss does not negatively impact their ability to do their main strategy defensively, which is get after the quarterback up front and limit the amount of time that a quarterback has to sit back, make their progressions, and pick you apart like happened so many times last year. Blackman being a beacon of that, Jake, of showing a level of strength and doing it, as Stephen Holder reported, in a different position at strong safety at times yesterday or today in camp, whereas he was a free safety last year. Versatility or position changes for the greater good of this roster, I welcome with open arms, as long as you're seeing the levels of success you would expect, which is what you got from Blackman today.
You know the guy that we haven't heard anything about? I shouldn't say we haven't heard anything about him, that we haven't talked about at all.
Twiggy?
Yes.
I saw the real Twiggy,
Really?
not in person, but on my feed, my algorithm. All of a sudden, I got a water skiing routine in my social media
Everything
feed.
going okay with Twiggy the water skiing?
I think
squirrel?
if it was from the same account, I think it might have been the Indiana State Fair.
It very well could have been.
Doing a throwback to last year because Twiggy was at the Indiana State Fair last
Do we
year.
those
remember what
unfamiliar-
Twiggy we met, by the way?
What's that?
What Twiggy did we meet? They gave us a number. Do you remember which Twiggy it was? Because in the video I saw last night, it said Twiggy 10, and I can't remember if we met Twiggy 10 or if we might have met Twiggy 9.
I wanted to say Twiggy 4, but that makes me concerned. For those that are unfamiliar, this time a year ago, Jonathan Taylor was the epicenter of Colts conversation. It was about holdouts. It was about trade demands. It was about meetings in RVs. It was the whole deal. It was about standing on the sidelines with a hoodie on, standing next to Chris Ballard awkwardly, trying to get video of him walking out. Does he have a problem with his back? Is it a problem with his leg? Is it a problem with his head? What's going on with Jonathan Taylor? So we, at the time that I moved over to this show, and we're coming up on an anniversary, right, Eddie? Didn't we say?
The 21st.
So the 21st of August was when I moved.
Do we have to get
into
gifts for that?
This slot. What's that?
Do we have to get gifts for that?
You guys have to get gifts from me.
I'm going
that's
through
what
the
I was
Rolodex,
asking.
by the way, to
What-
see
whatever
if
you'd like.
I'm going through the archives to see if we can figure out what year or edition of Twiggy you guys met.
Oh, okay.
I think it was. Let's hope it was Twiggy 10 in the same one. But so when we were talking about Jonathan Taylor at the beginning, at the outset of this show a year ago, and that also shows you, if it was the 21st, that shows you
Twiggy 10.
Was who we met?
it was
Yes.
Twiggy 10. All right,
Yes.
cool. So that's him. We were talking so much about Jonathan Taylor that I just decided that we were going to call him by a different name because I didn't want to hear his name anymore because it was becoming laborious and redundant and everything else. So we were at what was the name of the event where we were?
The Hoosier Hardwood
The
Festival.
Hoosier
There it is,
Hardwood
yep.
Festival. They had us out. It was great fun. And as part of that festival, they had Twiggy, the water skiing squirrel, Twiggy 10 apparently, and they brought Twiggy over, and both Jimmy and I got to hold Twiggy, which was cool. And so therefore we came up with the nickname of Jonathan Taylor of Twiggy so that we would not have to say Jonathan Taylor's name. And then not long after that, it was probably 2 months later, I was not with Twiggy the squirrel, but rather with Wiener Dogs while emceeing the Wiener Dog races for German Fest along with our friend Lindsay Monroe from Channel 13 and the flash comes across my phone. Contract extension for Jonathan Taylor, happiest guy on the planet. And thus Twiggy's name went back to being isolated to strictly the water skiing squirrel. So, but Jonathan Taylor himself, we have not heard a lot about in this camp, and I guess that's good news, but he is clearly going to be a focal point. I want to get back into this with Kevin when we have him on, just in terms of how much they're utilizing, if at all, a two-back system through camp, because we kind of got used to seeing, I thought Zach Moss was really good last year. Clearly his number was called at the beginning of the year in particular, but as time went along, even when Taylor was back and was full throttle, the combo of putting Moss in and kind of keeping defenses at bay of which style of runner they were going to have to tend with play to play, I really liked. And when Taylor needed a rest, I thought Moss was really good. To me, Sermon feels a little bit more like a Taylor-type runner and less of the bruising runner of Moss. Maybe that's where Anthony Richardson's running style comes into play, and they go that way with it. But I'm curious to see, Jimmy, what happens in terms of how much they utilize more than just one back there, because and just the fact that we have not heard a lot about Taylor.
I would side with no news is good news in that regard with Jonathan Taylor. He is the prime example of a player that you know what he is, you know what he's going to be. Just get through camp healthy, and then let's get to week one. But you bring up an interesting point about if you're trying to spell Taylor, you're trying to give him a breather, and you're looking for how the best way to do that is. Do you envision, Jake, that which of these two scenarios is the better option to get Taylor rest? Is it having a backup running back that's taking those carries? Or does it mean Anthony Richardson is being in, I don't want to say Anthony Richardson's running more, but it's Anthony Richardson passing or running more, if that makes sense. So your options are either you're giving carries to a second back to give Taylor rest, or Taylor's not involved in the play at all. Anthony Richardson is the one that's either dropping back or running.
Which one is the decoy for the other on a design run play?
Yeah.
I really want to know, and I don't know that we've gotten clarification on this. When the Colts say, and maybe we'll ask Shane Steichen this. I mean, I think he's tentatively scheduled to join us on Monday, I think. That may change. I understand schedules change, but we're going to be out at Colts camp on Monday, right?
Can't wait.
And one of the things that I hope to be able to ask Shane Steichen is when we hear about Anthony Richardson running the ball and you saying you're not going to limit Steph Curry from shooting threes. There are two kinds of ways that Steph Curry shoots threes. One is you come down and Steve Curry yells out, Raider, and they know what that means, and that means that Steph Curry's coming off the screen and they find in the ball and boom, 3 points. The other is shot clock's winding down. Draymond Green had it on the low block. He thought he was going to a reversal. Somebody is guarded, and Steph Curry then breaks himself free as the shot clock's running down. Ball's loose. He picks it up, shoots a three, boom. The same is true with Anthony Richardson running plays. Are we talking about Richardson dropping back and then tucking the ball on a quarterback draw and he's off by design, and that's what was called in the huddle? Or are we simply saying, no, we are just not going to rule out giving him the green light if he feels once he goes through his reads that progression 3 is not open, and so at that point, instead of hanging in, it's tuck and go time, bailout time. Are they design plays or are they bailout plays? To me, that's an interesting question that I don't know the answer to, and I don't know that they've necessarily tipped their hand on the answer to that.
I'd be pretty surprised if there weren't some design plays mixed in there. All we heard about in the weeks and months following the 2023 NFL draft was this is a dynamic, electric, super athletic quarterback in Anthony Richardson, and you're pairing him with the best running back in football. Imagine what defenses are going to have to do to stop that if they're both lined up in the backfield or they're both lined up in an option scenario. So despite what we've said about taking care of Richardson and dialing it back a little bit, I think you'll still have some runs by design. But the other element of that, Jake, is there's no Zach Moss, as we've highlighted many times this offseason. In other words, there's no clear number 2 running back where it's like, well, hey, he's not Jonathan Taylor, but he can handle a little bit of a workload and be positive or be productive with it to the point that Jonathan Taylor can get some rest. Since that's not there, since you don't clearly have that with Trey Sermon, with Evan Hull, with Tyler Goodson, if you're trying to cut back on Jonathan Taylor carries or give him a rest, does that instantly mean that Anthony Richardson's going to be the one running in those scenarios or throwing more? Like, what do you do when Jonathan Taylor's off the field? Are you really utilizing Sermon or Hull the way you did Moss? Or are they largely there just to pass block and give more throws for Richardson? Like, where does the divvy up happen if you're limiting JT's carries for longevity?
I would still think Jonathan Taylor's going to carry 18 to 25 times a game, don't you?
I do, yes.
I mean, isn't Jim Irsay's very bullish on that, right?
Correct.
Jonathan's a guy, we're looking at like a 2,000-yard season. I mean, we've obviously had guys, you go back and we've had guys in the past that were good runners, but with Jonathan, I think, the sky's the limit, kind of like what you hear out of like a Floyd album, I mean, that's basically what he says about him, right?
Yes.
Very enthusiastic. Now, Eddie just stared at the floor. Eddie, the impersonation, was that uncomfortable for you? You were staring at the floor the whole time.
No, I'm working over here.
What, working?
Yes.
And what are you working on?
I'm working on guests for next week. It sounds like we have Kurt Signetti next week, by the way.
Ooh.
Really?
Yeah.
All right.
I like that.
Me too.
I'm all in on Signetti. I'm telling you, I'm all in on Kurt Signetti. This guy is brimming confidence. I love it. What do you say about the Rose Bowl? We're just going to an old stadium to kick somebody's tail? And I'm paraphrasing.
Look, I don't.
Can we take a show trip to the Rose Bowl to go watch Indiana play?
Oh, I'm down. But I think
Eddie, you in?
I'm always down, Jake. Especially if we can make a.
Well, your head's down apparently when I'm doing my Ursay impersonation. What's that?
Especially if we can make a pit stop in Colorado.
Well, Eddie, have you been to California?
I have indeed.
I mean, come on.
I have indeed.
I'm as an IU alum, I'm very excited to see a pulse that hasn't been there about that program in a long time. And I love confidence. Who doesn't? Who doesn't admire confidence and a level of...
You got to back it up, though, right?
Oh, you do, for sure. But they're going to get that opportunity. And Jake, regardless of what the Signetti tenure holds, the jumping off point for this team this year, it's easy is insulting, but I don't have a better word for it. So we'll just say generous, I guess. It's a generous schedule for Indiana this year. They have a real opportunity. If Signetti is half of what he says he is, if he's able to do half of what he's done his entire coaching tree stop, they should be a bowl team. They should win a bowl game. Like, those are reasonable expectations.
I think their schedule
for what the
is
schedule
favorable
provides
for it,
to
right?
them. Yes.
Now, at UCLA, September 14th, I think I'm at an IndyCar event, but it's on NBC, right?
Yeah.
If you look at their schedule, Florida International, Western Illinois, UCLA, Charlotte, I'm telling you, this is Bill Mallory, Indiana, all over again. 4-0, baby. 4-0 and talking roses. Then Maryland, 5-0. Northwestern, 6-0. Indiana's ranked now. Knocking down the door. Nebraska. Come on. 7-0. Washington comes calling.
Michael Penix ain't walking through that door.
But
Kurt Signetti knows that.
True. And coaching change at Washington.
Yes, no DeBoer anymore,
8-0
right?
for the Hoosiers. At Michigan State, dumpster fire, right? 9-0. Michigan, Ohio State, 9-2.
All right.
Taking on Purdue to go double-digit wins and New Year's Day on the line. Their schedule, obviously we're being a little facetious here, but their schedule is very favorable.
The non-conference is set up to get those wins early for your bowl eligibility, and then your Big Ten schedule, you can look at the vast majority of them and say they're winnable games. Now, I'll be honest with you, there were moments once or twice during the Tom Allen era where I looked at the schedule and I said the same thing. I thought it looked easy. I drank some of the Kool-Aid. I bought into the hype, and it didn't turn out that way. And you saw how it went. If that happens here for Kurt Signetti, you're going to have a very irritated alumni base because then you get into promised to bill of goods territory. But I'm with you. I'm on the Signetti train. I've never felt this positively or been this energized about IU football, man, in a really, really long time. So as an alum, that's all I can ask for is that there's there's good energy, and it appears you have a guy that wants to be there, that welcomes the challenge of building things up like he has everywhere he's gone. And I can't wait for August 31st against FIU.
Now, more importantly for Indiana, more importantly for UCLA, who Indiana's going to beat on the 16th, as we talked about. More importantly for Oregon, who's going to be at Ross-Ade, and I'm going to see Purdue shock the world, and the Boilers are going to knock off Oregon and throw all hell in early into the Big Ten chase and everything else.
Will
and
you take a picture with the Duck for me, please?
That'd be awesome.
While you're there, if you see him.
The Duck will be there, right?
Yeah, I would assume so.
Not
Mascots
the big
travel.
inflatable one, but
No.
he'll be floating
Yep.
on the Wabash, I guess.
Yes.
But most importantly to all of that, Jimmy, now that the Big Ten is official as 18 teams, you've been losing sleep over this. You've been losing sleep over this, and you now feel much better about something that you saw yesterday, right?
I do indeed. If you're a fan of the Big Ten and you watch Big Ten athletics regularly, you will be familiar with the iconic Maps commercial, which takes you all the way. They would start with Nebraska, and they would make their way through the Big Ten Conference, getting to Rutgers at the end. And the question was, with this expansion, now you're going coast to coast. Is there room for that commercial to still run at 30 seconds time and include the newcomers of USC, of Washington, of UCLA, of Oregon? And they did it. They somehow found a way to do it. Maps is back. It's still with the Big Ten Conference, and it goes now from coast to coast, which is the most beautiful thing about this
But
expansion.
I would think that was never going to be in question, because wouldn't it be wise of them to be able to illustrate or cement the fact that they are coast to coast, right? Like, you want to be able to display to people like, holy cow, look at that.
That's what I hoped, Jake. I hoped that cooler heads would prevail. I hope they would have that type of knowledge within them. But, you never know. Jake, sometimes you get yourself excited, get your hopes up, and just get torn down by the big conferences, but they didn't do it this time. They were true to their fan base.
And you said the Duck is in it?
The Duck is in it. It's very, everything's very quick because you got to fit all the schools in there in a 30-second spot, but they plop up the Oregon
What's a
O, and then all of
spot?
a sudden, the 30-second commercial. Thank you, Eddie. I got too much into the technical terms. And you have the Oregon O pop up, and then the Duck just pops through like, hey, everybody. But it's very quick. It's very quick.
He went, meh, meh.
Yes, he did. Yep.
The Duck is cool.
Love the Duck.
Undoubtedly. And when they pan over, it's a quick camera jerk from the West Coast to Nebraska, right? They just completely avoid like Nevada and Colorado. Sorry, Eddie, and they're in Kansas, and they just go right up to Nebraska.
They
right?
did stop in Illinois for a bit.
That's
though,
fine.
So you were good.
Illinois is
there.
good. Michigan as well.
There
That's
was
also
one,
fine.
There was one edit that a fan made where they said, I can't believe they were able to intricately put the drones with the Michigan logos above Ohio State in the ad. Someone had photoshopped it and put it in there. So we're back, baby. Big Ten is ready to roll, and I'm looking forward to it.
It is a hard adjustment, admittedly. Not hard adjustment's the wrong. It's surreal at first, but it does feel, and I think if you were going to pluck the Pac-12 and you were going to if you had to pick 4 teams out of there, they kind of went with the 4 coolest, didn't they?
Yes, undoubtedly so.
I mean, it really, like, what a coup. Arizona and Arizona State were initially like the rumors, and I'm sorry, but Oregon and Washington is just far cooler than Arizona and Arizona State, right? Now, Arizona State does have Sparky.
They do.
And Sparky's cool until the time that I was wearing a Sparky T-shirt and an 82-pound liver spot came up to me, poked me in the chest, and called me a satanic worshiper. And I'm like, no, it's a Sun Devil. It's Arizona State University.
Yep.
Thought that I was wearing something like I was, Black Sabbath or something. And I'm like, no, that's not at all what's happening.
Well, I think it depends, Jake. Were you a fan of? Do you like the Oregon uniforms? Because that's part of the coolness nature for me is getting those exotic, crazy uniforms into the Big Ten.
I used to be. This is where I give Oregon credit.
Okay.
I've always said at the professional level, who are the teams in pro sports that change their uniforms and logos the most often? Give me 4 or 5 off the top of your head.
Oh, man. Eddie, will you help me out here?
Teams that have changed their logos the most often?
Yeah, the teams that every time you turn around, they've got a different hat, different helmet, different color scheme, whatever.
I'll throw the Atlanta Hawks out there the last 5 or 7
fair.
years.
San Diego Padres?
Yes.
Okay. Miami Marlins, Florida Marlins, whatever they're called this week.
Yeah. Yep, that'll work.
We'll go with those three, right?
Yep.
So, what have any of those teams won in the last 10 years?
The Chargers.
They do some modifications on there. Yeah.
The Chargers do. More often than not, now the teams that change their uniforms the least.
New York Yankees.
Okay.
Boston Red Sox. I mean, I
Okay.
guess they do city connect jerseys, but
Dallas
the baseline
Cowboys.
uniforms stay the
Dallas
same.
Cowboys, okay. The teams that don't have to change don't.
Lakers.
They sell themselves, right? Lakers, they sell themselves. So for Oregon, initially, when Oregon was completely tied in with Nike and Phil Knight, and I understand why they did it, the biggest selling point about Oregon for years was, oh, if you go there and you're a blue chip recruit, you get to design the helmet for a game. And look at and they had the helmets that have the wings of the duck in certain light. They come in as the game goes on.
Yep.
And look at the different, and wait until, I don't know if you've heard, but November 7th, when Oregon is going to go take on Washington State, you aren't going to believe the fluorescent fuchsia blast they're doing. Whatever, right? It was all, and to me, that got gimmicky and it got old, but they then lived up to it because they became this program, and Oregon was for a long time, and still to an extent is, a program that up until around Thanksgiving, they're just killing everybody. You know, how many years is it where it's like Oregon's 9-0 and they're winning by an average of 35 points a game, and then they go up against somebody that competes with them, and as soon as they taste their own blood, they kind of fold down. And I like Oregon, okay? I like them. But I'll give them credit that they've lived up to the hype they created for themselves based on all the marketing of it, because they are, year in and year out going into it, a team that really pops off for a while there. So, to answer your question long-winded, I do kind of like the uniform thing now because they backed it up.
Because that's part of the cool factor for me.
like
why
Indiana,
I was happy to get Oregon.
With all due respect, for me it was embarrassing when Indiana, 10 years ago, was putting out all these snazzy videos of all the different helmets they had and the different uniforms they had, and look at this, and the Night Harvest helmet and the Torch helmet and all this other stuff, and I'm like, you're going out wearing that, looking all snazzy and getting beat by MAC teams. Like, back it up at some point, right?
Yes. You can do all the creativity, all the fun stuff you want, but if losing is involved, it gets a lot harder
Speaking
to
of
justify.
losing, something happened today involving that. What's that, Eddie?
Collegiately, you guys have highlighted how Oregon has changed all the time. I feel like in college they change their uniforms so frequently, but like Notre Dame's like the only one that I can think of that hasn't.
That's fair. I would throw a bone to USC. I feel like they're pretty.
Notre Dame does.
Alabama?
Notre Dame does.
Not really.
Well, they'll have one game a year where they'll bring out like the Shamrock series, but other than that, it's the navy and white. Like there's not a ton of, and occasionally
obviously
a green
the helmet's
jersey.
for the most part the same,
Yeah,
right?
the gold always stays the same.
But speaking of losing, something did happen today that I think is going to upset Jimmy. But it's also going to require me to give Jimmy owes me an explanation. I'll tell you exactly what that is next. for years, and let me give two disclaimers here. This is not me being snarky, I promise you. Honestly, it's not. Two things that I used to really have that I've matured, that I used to have tangents about. One of them, years ago, I couldn't understand the Gen Con thing. I didn't grasp. I would drive around downtown and I see people walking around and they're dressed like superheroes and they're dressed like mythical figures and they all are carrying huge bags or backpacks with gaming stuff on it and wearing their credentials, whatever else, and I just couldn't figure it out. A lot of them barefoot, and that I couldn't figure out either. And it became almost like a target or a point of mockery for me of just like, what are these people doing? And then it dawned on me that when I go to Clemson football games, years ago I was able to go to a sunglass manufacturer as part of an IndyCar partnership during one of our road trips or away races, and was able to get a huge discount on sunglasses. So it was like, oh man, I mean, just load up here. And one of the things that I bought because of the massive discount was a pair of custom sunglasses that are orange. And the reason I wear, and I only wear them at Clemson games because they're orange. So when I go, I wear like my same Clemson sweatshirt and my orange Clemson sunglasses. And sometimes I've even been known to wear a pair of like purple, like sweatpants, like track pants type thing, because I'm at the Clemson game, and that's my outfit. That's what I wear. And that's when it dawned on me, I'm no different than the people that go to Gen Con. Good for them. If some sort of a board game or video game or whatever it might be is their passion and their leisure and their escape and their weekend hobby, and they find joy in dressing a certain way to support exactly that, it is no different than the people that you see walking into a Colts game with their face painted and wearing a Peyton Manning jersey. It's the same thing. It's all relative. So I'm like, yeah, I'm cool with that. That's cool, actually. And I kind of envy that they have something that they're that passionate about that would be fun to be able to get together with the people that you don't know, but you meet, you live in Arizona and you're playing a video game with the same group that are from Idaho, Washington, and Rhode Island, respectively, and now you're all going to meet in person. Very cool. So that with that, I'm cool. The other one is I used to constantly bag on the United States in soccer, and it's a talking point that people that have listened to me on the radio, and I appreciate that people have heard forever. So there's no need to belabor the point that I'm trying to make. What I'm saying is I understand that soccer, and in particular for the guys of your guys' age and younger, is a very, very popular sport here in the U.S. But I think that there is a chasm between the level of visual and enthusiastic support that people have for soccer and its translation into the United States competitive nature. Forever we heard how soccer was the next big thing coming. And forever, a lot of skeptics were like, I've heard this for too long. I think that it's 50% accurate now. It is accurate in the form of the enthusiasm, the knowledge of it is 100%, proven. I mean, the television contracts, the
you have Premier League rights.
See,
international soccer has become popular here. Like you're seeing growth measurables. Across the board.
It does not equate to the other big sports, but yeah, it is there, right? However, that is not translating into, in my opinion, the United States on international stages. I want you, Jimmy, to explain this to me, and sure. I'm going to give an Olympic result here.
Yep.
I don't think this is one that was going to be airing in prime time, so I'm not as hesitant
spoiler
to divulge
alert, I guess,
to people
if you're
what's
worried
going
about
on.
It. But yeah, spoiler alert. Now we move on.
Okay, the United States has been eliminated from the Olympics in soccer after a 4-0 defeat today to Morocco.
Nil.
Thank you, Eddie.
And in soccer, that is obviously a big
it's a beatdown
discrepancy. My two questions that I don't know the answer.
Okay.
The first would be this, and I guess a simple yes or no answer. This is or is not the same U.S. national team that will be performing in the World Cup theoretically, or that just got done playing in the tournament that we saw.
I would like to expand at some point, but no, Jake, this is not.
Okay. So, to put this in basketball terms, if the United States World Cup team, or the team that we just witnessed playing in the competition where they were defeated by, and I can't remember who eliminated them in the competition they were just in the Americas.
Uruguay.
The America's Cup. Okay. If that team is the United, if we're using this as the basketball equivalent,
yep.
The team in the Olympics that just got beat is what level of players?
It would be 18 to 22-year-old players making up the majority of the roster. So let's say you just picked players in college right now, or maybe really young NBA players. That's the entirety of the roster except for 3 positions. This is only for the Olympics. You can have 3 players on your roster on the men's side that are over the age of 23.
And that is true for every nation?
Correct. Yes.
Okay.
On the men's side. So I get what you're presenting here, and I think a lot of casuals might look at that 4-0 score, and it's a very easy, confusing thing to know or to see unless you know that caveat, which is this is not.
Well, but here's the thing, though. To me, that team should be the one of the United States that is the most competitive, because there is no demographic where soccer is more still actively played and followed in this country amongst its core fans than 18 to 22. If soccer has been this rising sport of a youth movement for the last, let's certainly say since the World Cup was hosted here in 94, of a 30-year stretch, then if you have 18 or 19-year-olds and they're going against other 18 or 19-year-olds, aren't these people that have been aren't these players that have been playing in year-round soccer and camps and programs and travel soccer and everything else for the vast majority of their life, and they are still not yet removed? I mean, at the professional level, one could make the argument, but by the time you're talking about 30 and 32-year-old or 25, 30-year-olds, whatever else, in the United States, that people start getting into other sports. But if they're at that level, shouldn't that team be the one that is most representative of where soccer is at its hottest in this country?
I wouldn't say it should be the national team, and making the national team should be the peak of soccer. But yes, you make a fair point that you would think it would be a strong representation of where soccer is headed for the United States. I would acknowledge the fact that, and I'm not trying to undercut all of this, but if you ask somebody from a country where soccer is the pinnacle of sport in that country,
which is most places, admittedly,
correct.
Right?
Let's take France, for example.
Okay.
They will tell you they don't care about men's Olympic soccer. You're not sending your best guys. You're only able to send
all the more
3.
reason why the United States should be competitive.
I'm not disagreeing with that aspect, but the caveat to this is the United States had not been to the Olympics in soccer on the men's side in 16 years. They broke that streak and they made it. They got out of their group. They made a quarterfinal, and they got rocked by a really good Morocco side who beat Argentina's team.
Side is team, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Morocco beat Argentina in group play, like a massive upset in terms of global scale at that age group. There is a level of pride of getting to the quarterfinals, but Jake, to your point, when you see them there in the knockout rounds, the narrative was, wow, they're going to be as good as the 2000 team that finished 4th place. And they might make a real run at this. And then it all gets blown up in your face with a 4-0, 4-0 loss to Morocco. It's a little disappointing the way they went out, because there was a lot of serious momentum about this young youth U.S. national team, but it is not by any case. The conversation that you want to have is the one about how everybody's telling you soccer's going to catch on and U.S. is going to be dominant in it, and it never happens.
I get that
and it never happens.
And I get that becomes a tired argument. I get
it. But it's a fair point, because at some point you need to back up results. This conversation you're having 2 years from now, when the World Cup is here, If they underperform like that, then that's the time for that conversation. This was not a representation of what the U.S. men's national team is going to be in 2 years. I don't fully understand all the intricacies of youth soccer. Yes, you would hope that they would be the ones that would be dominant. The problem is there's dominant youth clubs all over the world. The fact they made a quarterfinal, got out of their group for the first time since 2000, that is an accomplishment.
I think in the United States, more than other countries, and I could be wrong in this, parents can feel free to chime in and let me know on this, okay? Parents can feel free to chime in and disagree with me if they'd like, because I'm not saying this as a fact. I'm saying it as an educated observation based on conversations, based on outreach, etc. I think one of the number one things that holds back the United States in terms of our development of young athletes, and it's an interesting dynamic because it's somewhat of a catch-22 because it also, to an extent, is one of the things that most grows it. But I think year-long, off-season travel sports is a huge factor in limiting and handcuffing the United States from progressing in a lot of ways for two reasons. Number one, I think it increases athlete burnout. I saw it at the tennis level growing up in a tennis environment. I didn't play tennis, but I grew up with kids that were playing tennis all the time that were, from an Indiana standpoint, the best of the best. And by the time we were like sophomores in high school, they were totally over it because they'd been playing all the time. But the other aspect with travel sports that comes into play is the fact that eventually you get to a point where kids are playing because their parents are the ones funding the team, and you have a boulder in the stream where kids whose parents can afford the travel costs of going and playing in tournaments and staying in holodomes and traveling around and whatever else, those kids are continuing to play, and kids whose parents don't have the money to support it are being left behind. And that also creates a false narrative as to who's good and who's not. And I see it all the time with AAU basketball. All the time. I wish, I've said this and I'll say it another 100 times on the radio. I wish I had $1 for every person that has come up to me to tell me about a kid they know that is on a ranked 4th grade. Everybody. I'm not sitting here I'm not trying to disparage. I'm not trying to offend people. I'm simply trying to give a reality check, okay? The thing that no one is telling you in deep, dark places, if your kid is under the age of 12, is that every single team your kid is playing on a travel circuit in a travel sport is made up of kids who have somebody somewhere telling them that they are nationally ranked. Every team at an AAU tournament in the 4th grade is the 3rd best team in the country. There are 2,000 teams that are nationally ranked as the 3rd best team in the country. I hear it weekly. There are right now in Indianapolis, Indiana, there are 1,463 point guards that are the number 1 5th grade point guard in the nation. And if you look at AA, it happens all the time where you look at an AAU photo and you see it and you look at it and you go, okay, there's 3 really good players on this team, and then 8 other kids whose parents have a boatload of money and are paying for all of the travel for everybody else, and that's the only reason their kid's on the team, but they think their kid's good because the coach is telling their kid's good because they love the fact those checks keep cashing. It's a reality. I'm not saying one way or the other, for it, against it, whatever else. I'm giving a reality check to people listening that is 100% the case of what's going on with your kid with travel and youth sports and everything else.
Yep.
I see it all the time. I could show you my DMs, all of it. And the burnout factor is real, number one. And number two, I just think that in youth sports, a lot of times it's limiting. Once you get into the upper echelon years, it creates a false separation amongst kids that are really good from kids that aren't, a lot of times because of the the things that they are able to afford and the resources that they're able to have that other kids don't. Now, obviously, the other side of that, which I also applaud and understand, is for some kids, if someone sees that talent in them and is able to facilitate for that, it's a way out. I mean, I get it, but I'm just telling you. And especially so I think in soccer, I think you see it in baseball, and I think you see it in basketball. And I'm assuming that you eventually will see that in soccer as well, in the fact that some of the kids that might be the best players in the United States eventually are getting set aside because they are being replaced by kids who are not the best players, but the best resourced.
Yeah, I mean, pay for play has always been a problem in the country. And it's something that, in partnership with some MLS clubs, kind of trying to replicate what they do overseas, where you have these great Premier League clubs that have youth academies, that have ways to get involved at a more direct level. They've tried to curb some of that. It is still an issue, though, that's rampant around the country with youth soccer. And the other element that you've brought up in the past is there are, frankly, more sports and more sports opportunities here in the United States where you could potentially get college scholarships or maybe even one day make a living on, with football and baseball and so many other aspects pulling at you besides, and basketball, of course, pulling at you besides soccer. So, yes, those are all real issues. My big thing, though, that I want to make sure the casual soccer fan realizes is, on the women's side, there are no age restrictions. This is the very best that the women's national team has to offer. They are competing for gold. It is viewed as a true prestigious honor. On the men's side, you can only send 3 over 23 players. The U.S. did not send their very best of that group.
But that's true of everybody, right?
It is true of everybody.
Okay.
The U.S. did not send the best of that group. The fact that they made it to the Olympics as a qualifying team for the first time in 16 years, the fact they made it to the quarterfinals out of the group stage for the first time in 24 years is a good accomplishment. The fact they lost the way they did stings, but they lost to a good Morocco team that is, playing incredibly well, still riding all kinds of momentum. And they, again, are in a quarterfinal knockout round of a tournament, regardless of its prestige, among the very best in the world. So it's not the red flag panicky situation that it would be if, for example, this is the same result in 2 years when it is the full force national team on their home soil. If they were to lose in group play or lose in the quarterfinal 3-0 or 4-0, it would be a very embarrassing result, and then I would be eating all the crow with you today. We're not there yet.
Eddie, do you have tickets to give away?
Yep.
4?
State Fair.
Doing it next?
Sure.
You can pot this down. I'll wrap it, and you pot it back up. I'll be right on case. Guarantee it. Because I'm in demand. One lonely beastie I be. All by myself without nobody. The sun is beating down on my baseball hat. The air is getting hot. The beer is getting flat. Looking for a girl. I ran into a guy. His name is MCA. I said howdy. He said hi.
Oh, I stopped it. Sorry.
Did you know what we were doing there, Jimmy?
I did know what we were doing.
I hit the keyboard spacebar and it stopped it on accident.
At that point, you probably could have stopped me and said, like, hey, just so you know, I just stopped it.
No, I didn't want to stop that.
You were on a roll, and it was on tempo.
Totally. I'm telling you.
Hey, if it makes you feel any better, the podcast audience wouldn't have heard the payoff anyway because we don't play the music over there.
I thought we have some new thing where we can do that now.
Do we?
Let's just go ahead and move along and give away tickets. We have tickets to give away to the Indiana State Fair. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
Are we going to execute this properly, or are we going to be asleep at the wheel? Are we going to do this the right way?
What would that be?
Which one would you like to do it? We're going to do, let's do caller number 2 at 239-1070, and we'll put them on the air right now and do a little get to know your listener.
Got to be quick because we're over
Caller
on time.
number 2, you are on the air. Your name, please.
Charles Craig.
Charles. Charles, you're on the air. We don't need your last name. That's it. So, Charles, real quick, we're going to play Get to Know Your Listener. We've had a lot of success with this. Kids in particular love it. Charles, are you a regular listener to the program?
I get to listen for about an hour every day.
Oh, okay. And you have a very good radio voice, Charles. Can you do me a favor real quick and just say, this is Charles, and you're listening to The Fan? Can you do that real quick?
This is Charles, and you're listening to The Fan.
It's Charles, the official voiceover guy of the station. Okay, Charles, real quick. Did you grow up in the Indianapolis area?
I grew up in Whiteland.
Whiteland, okay. And when you were a senior in high school, who was the president of the United States, Charles?
Shit, you're going to have to make me think.
What year did you graduate from high school, Charles?
1995.
1995. Okay, that would have been Bill Clinton, who was the president of the United States in your senior of high school. And you're in what line of work now, Charles?
Tool and die.
Oh, that's cool. Now, and do you find yourself more on the tool side or the die side?
Well, right now I do more die stuff.
And then does that mean that you're making things different colors? Is that what the die is?
No.
Okay, that's what I always thought the die was. I thought one guy's making hammers and the other one's turning T-shirts different colors.
No, that's not it.
Okay. Well, anyway, would you like to go to the great?
Parts.
What's that?
We make car parts.
Oh, that's cool. Are you ready to go to the great Indiana State Fair?
I absolutely am.
All right, I'll tell you what, Eddie will get your information. We will send you on your way, and I appreciate the fact for an hour a day, Charles, that you listen to Query and Company. It is greatly appreciated. Kevin Bowen, 3 hours a day, is on this radio station in the morning, and he also joins us next. Now, I am not going to sing along and then have ask Eddie to pot it up so that you can see that I'm still on cue with that. I don't want to create too many challenges here. It is a Friday, 2 o'clock hour. That means that Kevin Bowen, who you hear in the morning with Andy Sweeney on the Wake Up Call with KB and Andy, joins us on the program to recap a Colts camp that took place today indoors. And, Kevin, I'll get to the first thing that I noticed. You had pointed out that you thought Julian Blackman had a really good day today. Is that a little bit of a wake-up call? Because they're all of a sudden, I think, the last couple of days, some of the conversation's been around, hey, the safety position, they're looking at some different things, and they're trying different combinations. Nick Cross is one that we've talked about. But to me, Blackman seems to be the one that has been the most consistent. Did he get a little bit of a push, if you will, going into today?
No, I think he's been the best player in camp, regardless of position. Frankly, I've half joked, half serious. I think you should hold out as you take a look at the rest of the safeties and how, inept the rest of the position is. Blackman's just that much better than everybody else in the group. So he was outstanding again today. A huge play down the field on Anthony Richardson, trying to throw a deep ball to Michael Pittman Jr. So, yeah, playmaking galore. Really, for him, the only real question of his career has just been health. It's not bad. He's been a really solid player and played a variety of positions, and I'll be curious to see how, the Colts handle just that safety room, because I think there's a ton of questions outside of Blackman. Even where Blackman plays might be a question because, maybe they're thinking, hey, free safety right now, it's not working out for us. We might need to put Julian Blackman back there, even though, strong safety is where he had a career year last year. So, yeah, Blackman's the best player in camp.
Yeah, Kevin, you walked into my next question. I think you had commented on it as well earlier today. Stephen Holder had a tweet about it also. Blackman plays strong safety last year, has a career year, and he was playing free safety a lot of the action today at camp, including when he made that interception on Anthony Richardson. What are the pros and cons of moving Julian Blackman to free safety if they were to do that, and where do the rest of the dominoes fall around a room with a lot of questions?
Well, the pro would be, theoretically you have a center fielder you really trust. And, obviously just look at week 18 of Houston. You didn't have a center fielder you trusted, and you got burned. So that would be, I am probably easily the biggest pro. The con would be, he's not around the ball that much, unless teams are really going, trying to go over the top on you. There's not going to be a whole lot of playmaking for Blackman to have, whereas at strong safety, he's closer to the line of scrimmage, and he's just inevitably going to be around the ball a little bit more. But it's kind of weird when you look next to him. Nick Cross, they've kind of always viewed as this, free safety, and he runs the freakish 40-yard dash time and, all this stuff. But, the guy that I think is probably knocking on Nick Cross's door the most is Ronnie Harrison Jr. And for those unfamiliar with his background, it's probably more strong safety linebacker. He even played linebacker for the Colts last season. So, I guess if you're serious about him, would you then move Blackman to free safety? Again, it's pretty complicated. It's pretty murky. It's probably an indicator of what you lacking right now at safety. Again, I've said for months now, it's just confused me why they have not made a move there. Corner, I can actually understand. Safety, I cannot. But Blackman is a guy that, again, has been asked to play a lot of positions, and that certainly is someone you trust. So theoretically, maybe they're viewing this kind of second week of camp of, all right, let's try to see, last-ditch effort in-house of what you've got, and then whatever, get to this time next week and see if you need to make a move.
Kevin, I have often said that, I go by precedent, where I look at situations and then I find one where we've already seen something like that happen to kind of give us a better perspective. By that I mean, and I think I've asked this to you before, but T.J. Green was a guy that when he was drafted out of Clemson for the Colts, they loved his athleticism and tried him at safety. He'd played corner, I think, or vice versa, but it was the raw athleticism that the Colts fell in love with and continued to try to be patient on, and eventually it just didn't work out. Is Nick Cross entering into that? Is there danger of him entering that category, where they're in love with the athleticism and the cross speed, pardon the pun, but just the football instinct has yet to resonate?
Yeah, there probably are some similarities. Green got chances, plenty of chances. And, frankly, I just thought he made some really dumb plays way too often. And that kind of hurt him. And, yeah, to your point, Jake, I think some NFL teams viewed him as a corner, some viewed him as a safety. And, maybe that played into it a little bit as well. Cross, for the most part, he's always been, he has always been a safety. The thought was at Maryland, he came out early, and the Colts felt like, all right, he's going to be a second-rounder next year if he would have stayed. While here we are late in the third round, and he's still on the board, why not, give up a future third-rounder, and we'll, take a chance on him. He actually started the first 2 games of his career, and then he got benched midway through week 2 and has only started 2 of the last 32. So, yeah, I could see that, similarities, young defensive backs. Certainly, you're enamored with the athletic traits on both of them. I don't think it's maybe exactly the same, but, yeah, I could certainly hear you out on that.
Kevin Bowen is our guest. He's on the Express Pro Tire and Auto guest line. You hear him in the mornings, of course, with Andy Sweeney on the wake-up call from 7 until 10. Kevin, we were talking about this earlier as well. Want your thoughts on it because you've watched the plays as they've unfolded here in camp, and that is Anthony Richardson in terms of, we know the quote now from Shane Steichen, I'm not going to take the three-point shot away from Steph Curry. When you're talking about Anthony Richardson being able to utilize his legs and ability to run the ball, do you believe that Steichen sees that more as, hey, we're going to tell him he has the green light once his progressions and he's gone through his checks and nobody's open, he can tuck and run? Or are they going to design quarterback draw plays and run plays specifically from the time of the huddle designed to Anthony Richardson?
Definitely the latter. Yeah, they will design a lot for Richardson. And they probably view it a little bit more of when things break down, that's when you need to protect yourself. And that's probably where I would disagree. And really all 3 parties, I think, have said something to that effect, and all 3 parties being Steichen, Ballard, Irsay, he's got to protect himself and this and that. It's like, I should probably go back and watch every Anthony Richardson run from last year. I didn't view him as a reckless runner. Like, I view Josh Allen as reckless. I view Will Levis reckless as hell, although it looks like he's doing well off the field, so congrats to Will on that. Andrew Luck, I would view as a reckless runner. Richardson, I don't, view in that category. Hell, the first play after his concussion, he comes back, and remember that first play the Rams gave, he slides, like in the middle of the field. Lucas Oil gives him, like, the Bronx cheer. So I just I think Richardson wants to be a passer. He realizes his legs, but, like, he's not one that's like, oh, no, 2 seconds after the play has started, there's nothing here, I'm going to tuck and run, and I'm going to act like every play is, 4th and goal of the Super Bowl. So that's where, I would disagree. I've said this 1,100,000 times. Limit, not eliminate, and that would be in reference to the design runs, not to Richardson's decision-making on his end. So, sure, does he need to make sure that he continues to be smart? Yes, but again, I thought he did a nice job at that. I don't think that's the issue. At the end of the day, he got hurt on 4 design runs last year, and he got hurt with 3 dudes under 225 pounds injuring him, not 300-pound defensive tackles, falling on Andrew Luck in the huddle, or I should say in the pocket against Tennessee. So I think it's more of a Colts decision-making than a Richardson decision-making if I were going to, limit the old Steph Curry analogy, which I don't think totally checks out.
Kevin Bowen is our guest. He joins us on the Express Pro Tire and Auto guest line. You, of course, hear him 7 to 10 a.m. on the wake-up call with KB and Andy, and you should be locked into his work on 1075thefan.com and on Twitter at kbowen1070 throughout the entire Colts season, but especially now during camp. Kevin, I asked this of Jake earlier. We were discussing the backup running back role with no clear Zach Moss level threat to spell Jonathan Taylor at this point. I want to give you kind of a hypothetical scenario. If moments arrive, which they naturally will, where you want to give Jonathan Taylor a spell or give him a breather, and he is off the field, does that lead to, name a running back, any running back on the Colts depth chart right now, getting 5 to 10 snaps a game, or carries a game rather, or does it lead to more Anthony Richardson plays, meaning an increase in volume of passing for him or an increase of him being the one running the ball? Does that make sense? So will they have a traditional backup running back that's there to actually take carries, or does Jonathan Taylor moments where he's not on the field or not getting carries mean it's Anthony Richardson with more opportunities in his hands alone?
Yeah, I think Trey Sermon could handle a series each half. That's kind of probably how I would look at it. What does that add up to? Sermon gets, 2-3 carries on each of those series, something like that. I mean, that to me kind of checks out. I don't think Taylor needs much more rest than that. You're obviously not paying him to rest too often. So, you got to keep that in mind. I think Taylor's always been, extremely durable, and, it's not like he's stuck in wind too much during a game. And again, I don't think you just want to treat Richardson too much in that manner. I totally understand the question, but I don't think you want to be like that. And, if this offensive line is, what it looked like last season, I mean, theoretically, you should have a pretty effective runner even when Taylor isn't in there. I mean, Moss had a really nice, career year, really. And I forget the game. Maybe it was Pittsburgh I'm trying to think of. Like, it was Sermon and Goodson that kind of went off in that game when I guess maybe Taylor and Moss were both hurt. I don't know why those two would have had a big game together, but I kind of recall that late last year. So I've probably always been a little bit more of your offensive line as kind of the first thing that sets it up. And sure, when you're breaking home runs, the running back obviously can do a huge part on his own and taking it from whatever the second to the third level there. But yeah, I would say Trey Sermon is your backup running back, and Trey Sermon getting a handful of carries a game. Sure, why not?
How's Jonathan Taylor looked, Kevin?
Dry, healthy. Yeah, I mean, he looks Taylor-like. It's kind of funny that you even say it, Jake, is like, I watched him the first couple of days at Grand Park, and it's like, oh, yeah, that's what Jonathan Taylor looks like practicing.
I mean, we haven't heard, anything about him, you know what I mean? Which is good.
Yeah, and obviously, last year the saga was, well played out by this point. And, to be fair to Taylor, I mean, today was practice number 2 in full pads. There's no live tackling. It's, running backs and the crowd celebrates them getting to the second or third level, and the linebackers are yelling, like, I would have tackled them back here. It's just kind of hard to gauge it totally there. But, yeah, I mean, Taylor looks totally fine to me and, looks very, very healthy. And I see no reason why he shouldn't be considered one of the top backs in the league.
Kevin, for a couple of years now, we've had the running gag of the soundbite from Chris Ballard, Bowen always talking about wideouts, and every time I turn around, Kevin Bowen's talking about wideouts. And for a long time there, as a fan base, as a media group, that was the question. Why do the Colts not have better wideouts? Has the wideout room to you in watching camp so far impressed you in terms of its depth, or is it strictly a matter of they might have a lot of guys, but that doesn't mean they have a lot of guys?
I would say it's probably the most depth in a while. I mean, boy, I'd have to go back. Hilton was definitely kind of reaching the back end of his career as Ballard's first couple seasons unfolded. It might be the most depth, in this era, which, again, I don't think is like a ringing endorsement, but I'm just trying to compare it to the past 7 or 8 years or so. Like today, for example, and I think Joe Flacco helps, to be frank. Like when you watch the second-team offense, the first-team offense stalled out today in a couple of 2-minute periods. Second team gets in there, and it's, Flacco, forget if it was Pierce or I think it was Pierce with Ashton Dulin, and it's like, damn, at times you need, Pierce and Ashton Dulin to play every snap with the starters in a game or a whole lot of snaps, and Flacco, isn't your average backup either. So, Pittman and Downs are, I think, exactly what you think of them, just super reliable, super consistent, especially Downs. And then I think in A.D. Mitchell's case and Alec Pierce's case, I think each of the last 2 practices have been their best. Mitchell today and Pierce the other day. So, I mean, there you're at 4. Anthony Gould strikes me as a dude that, as a rookie, people will forget about for 3 or 4 weeks. And then Shane Steichen will think, oh, here's the perfect time to chuck one down the field to him, and boom, he's going to strike and maybe be the hero of the game. And then Doolin is just, he's a lot better as your number 6 than your number 3 or 4, which, again, at times you've asked him to be in his career. So, yeah, I would say nice depth. Again, do you have enough high-end playmaking? I think you need to see that unfold, and you need to see it against a better secondary than what they're going up against right now. But certainly I think from a depth standpoint, there's a little bit more there than there has been.
The Fan Zone Kevin Bowen joins us on the Express Pro Tire and Auto guest line. KB, a 2-part question. First, because I didn't see both of them, but the first half of the question, Laiatu Latu being in Anthony Richardson's face and getting pressure there, Was that while he was in the pocket, or was that him trying to escape and create something with his legs and Latu just made a play?
There's 3 Latu plays that stood out to me today, Jimmy. One was kind of like a bootleg, and I think he just happened to be the end where the bootleg was. He might have chased that down, but for some reason, you know how that can kind of happen.
Yeah.
The end just makes a great read. He's there. The other 2 came in the pocket, 11 on 11, 2-minute drill to end practice. Foaming at the mouth, chance for the defensive line. Probably one of the more competitive moments I think of camp so far. They get into an early third down. The offense, Latu beats, I think it was Blake Freeland. Braden Smith still isn't taking all the reps as he comes back at right tackle. Sacks Richardson, I say that in quotes, of course, ends the drill. 3 and out, I should say. And then the second time, Richardson in the pocket, the pressure got to Richardson so quick, he just had to chuck it out of the pocket and threw it into the stands, and the officials there whistled them for intentional grounding. So obviously a catastrophic penalty, and that knocked them out of field goal range. They kind of got back into it, and then the rookie kicker, Spencer Schrader, missed from 54. So, yeah, I guess 2 in the pocket, 1 out, to answer your question.
So the reason I asked that, and we said this at the beginning of the show today, with training camp, my bar is always stay healthy, and unless you're like a proven veteran that's clearly struggling or clearly missing a step, I'm not too worried about it. I want the real results once you get to week 1. So I ask that to say what Latu did today while going against my rule of overanalyzing one day of camp. Would you chalk it up to struggles from Anthony Richardson, struggles from the O-line, or Latu making plays?
I mean, the easy answer is a little bit of all 3.
Right.
Again, I try to reference who the offensive tackles are as best I can just to put some perspective in there. Braden Smith and Quentin Nelson's words was this team's best offensive tackle last year, and, he wasn't the one, blocking Latu on the play that I was referenced there.
Kevin, in other words, if Kwity Paye, I'm sorry to cut you off, if Kwity Paye did the same play, would it have been viewed as second nature, or would it have been viewed as an impressive play? Like, are we grading a good day for Latu in the right light?
I think we are, because for Latu, it's happening multiple times within a practice.
Okay.
It's not, I just gave you 3, and you could maybe take out one of them, but, still 2 plays and 2 drives. That's it. Imagine, and let's just call it what it is, a sack and a pressure. If you come out there week 1 and on the first 2 series of the game you have a sack and a pressure, I think you're on the way to having a pretty good game. Hell, if you want to use Kwity Paye for an example, I don't know how many games last year he had, a sack and a pressure, on 2 separate occasions there. So I would say it's just the consistency. And the thing, I guess a couple things about Latu that impresses me, and nothing about him off the field, which the off the field makeup, appears to be golden. On the field, he's versatile. He can line up at both spots. That's not something that Kwity Paye's done. That's not something a lot of these former rushers the Colts have drafted high have done. He's got a variety of moves. And then the other thing is, his athleticism and speed, it's matched by his motor. And I'm probably stereotyping a little bit here, but I feel like you get fast dudes, but they're not the walk-on try-hard guys, too. Where, Latu's both of that. There was a play, I think it was the first full practice. We were talking about it with Matt Taylor this morning, where Latu sacked Richardson twice. He sacked him with his speed, and then he thought the play was over in typical rookie fashion. He's not trying to hit the quarterback. But then he realized, wait, Richardson's still going and the play's still going? Well, then he chased him down with his motor. And, again, it's just one of these things where, he's not the speed rusher that gets the quarterback or gets close and then he's bending down at his knees and asking for, some Gatorade. No, he keeps going. And, sometimes those can certainly lead to effort sacks, especially when you have quarterbacks that can kind of keep some plays alive there. So, all that stuff I said about Latu earlier in the week, whatever today's date is, what are we, August 2nd, something like that? As of this point, which, again, it's not real football, he's checked every box that's put in front of him so far. Everything he can do so far, full pads, no pads, Jake Witt, Braden Smith, Bernard Ryman, whoever, he's checked all of those boxes. And I don't recall, whether that be Kwity Paye or Kamoko Terry or Ben Banogu or any of these other guys, or frankly any of the other Colts rushers in recent years, edge rushers, I don't recall them doing this as consistently as he has done it through the first, 6 practices at Grand Park and even dating back to the spring.
Kevin, how has and I know that he's obviously coming off injury, seemingly all the time, but One of the guys that I think is kind of an underrated aspect for the Colts that we just don't give enough love to is Braden Smith. You mentioned him earlier. He's a really important piece for their line. How has his camp gone?
Yeah, well, I'll just start there without question. He's important. I mean, he's an important piece of the whole team. Slowly, yeah, he missed first 2 or 3 days. I think he was the last guy to practice here in 2024, coming off 7 missed games last year, off-season knee surgery, and he probably does like one. Let's say they have 3 team periods a day, so 3 11-on-11 periods, about a handful of plays each. He probably does 1, maybe started to creep into doing 2 of them. So we're obviously still a ways away from him, being ready to play 50, 60 snaps week 1. Granted, you're over a month away from being ready. So he's vital. Again, I'll go back to the Nelson quote from earlier this week. When he's out there, he was their best offensive lineman from last year, and I think you really felt him. Guys like him and Julian Blackman, just even a missed game or 2 can just be monumental. I mean, Braden missed 7 and Julian Blackman missed the last 2. I mean, if you trimmed Braden Smith's missed 7 to 5 missed, if you, instead of Blackman missing Atlanta and Houston, if he only misses 1, like just those 2 guys that, nobody in Lucas Oil is wearing their jerseys. If they just played a little bit more last season, this team's probably a playoff team. And we're not talking about Richardson and Taylor and Pittman and Franklin and Kenny Moore and all these other guys. Those are just 2 really important people, to your point, Jake, that we probably just don't talk about enough.
Do they have depth there? Offensive line, my line, Kevin, you've heard me say it a million times, right? I mean, cell phone chargers and sunglasses, you just can't have enough of them. Do they have, though, the kind of Swiss Army guys, the Charles Johnsons type that can spell them in different areas, or are they still finding out the depth that they might or might not have at the line?
Charles Johnson, good work there, Jake, on a Friday. You're not throwing in the towel an hour 15 of the week here. Great work.
Thank you.
I think it's a fair question, especially at tackle. Blake Freeland's year 2. Matt Gonzalez is the rookie out of Pittsburgh, the 3rd-round pick. Today, I swear I saw him line up at 3 different spots. So they're clearly trying to create that left tackle, right guard. I think he's been at this camp. So they're trying to create that. Yeah, the Joe Wrightses, the Joe Haigs of the world, all of them. I think that's a fair question. It's why I put Bernard Ryman number 1 on the most indispensable list. I think there and safety. I mean, those are the 2 that, again, I know it's not flashy to maybe talk about those positions, but still, if either of them were to go down, Braden or Ryman, who missed a couple games, I think, last year too, I think you have some questions there.
Kevin, what were your overall takeaways and thoughts of the new kickoff rules being implemented in the Hall of Fame game? And are you like me, where perhaps you had too high of expectations and you were disappointed that we didn't get a house call with these new rules out of the gate?
Yeah, it's probably like me, one Tiger to win another major. 7 of the 8 were returned. I mean, that's a crazy number compared to last year. I mean, we saw 7 kick returns last night in the game. Do you know how many kick returns the Colts had last season?
I know that 22% of kickoffs around the league were returned last year, which is an all-time low. I don't know the Colts specific number in front of me.
The Colts had 9 kick returns for the entire season.
Wow.
So, I mean, when you put it into that light, 7 of 8, and, you point out the percentage, Jimmy, obviously it's a step in the right direction. It's not earth-shattering, but, with that and the extra point, we've gotten away from line up at the stall plays. And I think that's what the NFL is going for. It's, obviously there's a safety element involved in all of this, but still they want to keep the product as entertaining, I think, as they can without, going, 2-hand touch style on you. So it's weird. It's a little funky. We saw 2 penalties. I think that will be something to keep an eye on. It sounds like the officiating will be a little bit more lenient on some of that stuff, but it's definitely unique. It's definitely different. And I feel like people that are mad about it are only mad about the onside kick angle to it, of like you have to, designate the onside kicks. It's like, we're jarred in this city because of what happened in the Super Bowl with the Saints, and, even McAfee, that was a real weapon for a couple of years with McAfee and some of those surprise onside kicks. Like, that's just not that much of a reality. So I'm totally good at the NFL exploring with it, and I'll give the NFL credit for putting their ego to the side and pretty much adopting a play that's from the XFL.
Yeah, you're right. It is. I mean, that is one of those that, and there were, I think there have been a couple wrinkles that you've kind of seen along with that. Kevin, you guys have what upcoming on Monday? And actually, for that matter, what can Colts fans look for this weekend in terms of coverage?
Well, correct me if I'm wrong, but it'll be you guys out there Monday. Is that right?
Correct.
Because it's an afternoon day.
We are out there Monday. Yep.
We recorded with Jelani Woods after practice today, so we'll air that on Monday. Sunday is an afternoon practice. So I want to say 4 o'clock Sunday, 2 o'clock Monday, and then our final 2 days out there with the show will be Wednesday and Friday. And then it's crazy to think, guys, a week from Sunday is the preseason home opener, and then once you get through that, they only have 2 practices left up there. It's those 2 joint practices with the Cardinals. So today was the midway point, 6 down, 6 to go from Grand Park, and you know, I know you probably feel this way in the month of May, Jake. I feel like you're going to snap your fingers right now, and all of a sudden, DJ Stroud will be inside of Lucas Oil Stadium in week 1.
You're right, and then you snap them again, and all of a sudden it's cold outside. That's always my thing about that.
That's depressing as hell to end this segment.
All right, Kevin, have a good weekend, and we'll talk to you soon, all right?
All right, boys. See you later.
All right, Kevin Bowen joining us on the Express Pro Tire and Auto Guest Line. I always say that's my only hesitation with football, right?
The cold weather is right around. Winter is coming, Jake.
Winter is coming.
It's Friday. It's a feel-good Friday, and you have to say that, really?
Oh, it's not. I mean,
you probably just made our millions of listeners sad.
No, we feel
I'm
good
realistic.
now. We enjoy it now. We just are properly level-headed to know what is down the line. But enjoy the summer right now.
I am realistic. I'm just simply a realist.
You are?
Very much so.
Okay.
But it is indeed a good for the heart, feel good Friday, courtesy of our friends at Franciscan Health. And we're going to do a story time with a happy story next. Which means our friends at Franciscan Health bring us a feel-good, good for the heart Friday. Try to do this each and every week to just give you a little story that maybe at the dinner hour or over the weekend when you're having a beer with somebody, you can go, I heard a pretty cool story today. And I'm really looking forward to during the high schools, now that high schools are underway, featuring, because we give so much credit and so much love to, deservedly, the Mr. Basketballs, the Miss Basketball, the top female or male athletes within the different stick and ball or high-profile sports. Understandably and rightly so, those kids get a lot of attention. But my initial thought for this particular segment was to feature athletes that maybe, once we get into the school year, are those that get a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to go out and get to the field or have overcome great odds, and their victory is not necessarily in a final score, but simply in being out on the diamond, out on the field, out on the court. And I look forward to being able to share that over the course of the school year. But, of course, in the non-school season, we found, and I've found, and people have submitted to me different stories of victories. Victory comes in different forms, right? One person's victory might simply be finishing a race or entering a race or completing a goal as opposed to actually being at the top of their field. And then sometimes sports offers redemption stories, which is kind of what we have today. But before we get to all that, I want to tell you about the number one heart program in Indiana for cardiology by Health Grades and number one in Indiana for interventional coronary care and major cardiac surgery by CareChecks. Talking about Franciscan Health, who offers an affordable heart scan for just $49 where you can self-refer, pay out of pocket, and get a free heart health risk assessment included with every screening. Non-invasive. And again, as I've said, when it comes to the arteries of your heart, think of it as a garden hose. Two ways in which that can get blocked. One of them is there's just a lot of dirt, a lot of sediment that eventually builds itself in the inside of that garden hose, and eventually that restricts how much water can flow through it. The other way is a rock gets lodged in it, or in the case that I had, a clot gets wedged into it. Those clots can come in a number of different fashions or from a number of different origins, but in terms of that first area, calcium buildup, the hardening of your arteries. That's what a heart scan is able to find out and give you that health risk assessment, especially if you have had family heart history, if you are over the age of 40 and have been a smoker, either you still are or you were at one time, if you are obese or you have diabetes. Those are all some of the risk factors that you want to take a look at and make sure that you are staying on top of it. The number one cause of death for men and women in the United States over the age of 40 is heart-related, so you want to make sure that you're staying on top of that. Franciscan does those $49 heart scans. You can find out more at franciscanhealth.org/screening bundles. Again, franciscanhealth.org/screening bundles, or you can simply Google Franciscan heart scan, or as many have done with me, send me a text and I will send you in the right direction. Make sure that you are getting taken care of. So let's talk about Nick. Nick's a British guy. We like Brits, right, Jimmy?
Love Brits, Jake.
Oh, that's right, yes. My name's Nick. A British fellow. Nick was born in Marlow, Buckinghamshire, England. I think I'm saying that right. Buckinghamshire? I don't know. We'll just say Marlow, England. And was a swimmer. Pretty good swimmer was Nick. As a matter of fact, in 1994, he competed in the Commonwealth Games in Vancouver, Canada, representing Great Britain. Did well. Got 3 bronze medals in those competitions, which allowed him to qualify for the 1996 Olympic Games in Atlanta in the United States of America. Nick getting his introduction to the United States. He was, of course, as I mentioned, a Brit. And in the Olympics, he had been, by the way, the 100-meter a 100-meter champion, I believe in the breaststroke in 1994. But he gets into the Olympics and he gets into a relay team in the 1996 Olympics. And his dream in the 96 Olympics is to be able to get a medal. But he goes into the Olympics in 96, and during the relay in one of the prelims, one of his teammates leaves too early in the relay, and as a result, the British team is disqualified, and the dream of the Olympics for Nick in bringing home a medal, unfortunately, is over. Now, that's not to say that Nick didn't become still a very talented swimmer that won accolades and awards, even though that dream of the Olympic medal was gone. 1998, he goes to the Commonwealth Games, this time in Kuala Lumpur, and wins a silver there. And then gets the opportunity to come back to the United States in the same area, close to the Atlanta area Olympics, to swim at the collegiate level. Started at UCLA, granted, but transferred to Auburn. And at Auburn, he meets another swimmer, Allie, and the two of them become a couple, fall in love, and start a family. They have 3 children. They live in St. Louis, as Nick's job, once he got out of swimming, takes him to St. Louis. And then once the COVID pandemic hits, they say, you know what? Our kids enjoy swimming as much as we do, and there's a pretty good program in Carmel, Indiana. Let's move there. So they move to Carmel, and he has 3 children that are all swimmers. One of them, actually 2 of them, but one of them gets into the Olympics again in a relay. The 4x200 freestyle. Swims in the prelims, representing as a female the women's 4x200 freestyle relay team for the United States of America, and trying to pursue and fulfill the dream of Nick, who we, of course, had that medal elude him. And in swimming in the prelims, Alex, the daughter, represents Team USA, represents Carmel, Indiana, and is part of 8 swimmers that make up the relay team throughout the different levels of the Olympics. And that 4x200 freestyle team goes on to medal and get a silver medal in the Olympics. And even though Alex did not swim in the finals, a new rule in the Olympics by the International Olympic Committee when it comes to swimming says that all swimmers that swim at any level throughout the prelims for a relay team indeed gets a medal. So not 4 that were in the finals, but all 8 get to go up onto the podium and receive their medals for the Olympics. And as a result, Alex fulfills the dream, the vision of Nick Shackle. And Alex Shackle, whose brother Aaron Shackle was also in the Olympic Games and finished 6th in the 200-meter butterfly, both of them in the Olympics. But Alex Shackle becomes just the 2nd high school athlete in Indiana history to receive a medal in the Olympics, joining for the first time since 1968 that it had been done. And just, in 1968, a high school athlete from Indiana did receive a medal. So just the 2nd time ever that a high school athlete from Indiana receives a medal, and a silver for Alex Shackle of Carmel, Indiana.
Let's
and
go.
For Nick and for Allie, watching 3 different swimmers that have come through now and represent their family. Aaron, Alex, and Andrew. Again, Andrew swimming and finishing 6th, and Alex now bringing home a silver medal. Can you imagine entering your senior year of high school and writing that paper when you enter school? So what did you do over the summer? Well, I got a job at Amalia's and was bagging groceries. What about you? Well, I mowed some lawns, and we went to Yellowstone, and that was neat. How about you? I actually went and won a silver medal and brought it back, and for show and tell, I'll be showing it in the cafeteria next week. But considering everything that her father went through, considering that her mother also a great swimmer, they met at Auburn. The 2 of them were at Auburn together and then had 3 children, and now one of them. And, Jimmy, the coolest part about this, one would assume, this is going to be the first of many, many Olympic Games, probably, because you look at Katie Ledecky, you look at Michael Phelps. You know, the opportunity is there for her and for both of them, but for her to be able to swim in multiple Olympics, which is extremely cool.
Yeah, as you continue to see advancements in the sport, advancements of how athletes take care of their bodies and being able to extend life in the pool, this hopefully is just the first of many. So congrats all around.
I think, now here's the other question, and I've asked this before. What would you do if you won an Olympic medal, especially as a high school student? What would you do with it? I mean, would you wear it to school, or would you be embarrassed? I'd wear it, right?
I wouldn't. I think you would. We've had this conversation before in varying levels. If I was a high school student, I'd wear it day 1. I don't know that I'd wear it all. Like picture day, baby. I'm bringing out that Olympic gold medal. Come on. Right? Like you're getting your student ID.
You have
and
no
the
idea
ID is
how
gonna
heavy
have
those are.
Those
medals.
Well, I'm not doubting that, so I'm only wearing it one day. I might not even make it past the picture session early in the morning. But you know how it is. First day of school, you go get your student ID picture taken, assuming they still do that. That's what they did when I was in high school. I want the Olympic gold front and center, baby. But I don't think I'm wearing it, in March when we're,
I mean, I think it'd be awesome.
having
right?
class at the bubble.
By the way, the 1976 Olympic team, Jennifer Hooker of Bloomington, was just 15 years old, swam in the prelims, but was not in the finals. And back then, you had to all be, so it would have also applied. So there have been examples before, but still, very, very, very cool. No question about it. There have been other high school swimmers that have been fabulous. The only other time that an Indiana high school medalist from the high school standpoint, Fort Wayne Snyder's Sharon Wickman at the 1968 Mexico City Olympics won gold in the 200 breaststroke and bronze in the 100 breaststroke. That is the only other time, 1968. But I'd be wearing that bad boy all the time. Now, the medals are bigger. I mean, I've told you before, Sugar Ray Seals from boxing.
There's a piece of the
won one
Eiffel
in
Tower in
1916.
these ones.
Is it really?
Yes. Yeah.
Now, how big a chunk of the tower did they take out? If it's one of the legs, I'd be a little worried,
like,
right?
It's like when you buy one of those, a little bigger than one of those ball cards that you might buy that has like a piece of game-worn jersey in it.
Yeah.
It's a little bigger than that. It's like a square.
Did they just
They explained what it was, like the area of the Eiffel Tower they were able to excess metal. I don't know, Jake. It's not I assume they had engineers on site to make sure that you weren't going to destroy.
Do you know
an
the
iconic
origin of the
landmark.
Eiffel Tower?
No, I don't. I
Eddie,
think
do you know the
you've
origin of the
told me
Eiffel
before,
Tower?
but I do not.
Tower Eiffel?
I do not.
During the World's Fair in Paris,
Okay,
and
yeah.
I regret that I don't know the year, it would have been the 19th century, they essentially held a contest for people to see who could create or submit a piece of art or a sculpture that would be the epicenter of the World's Fair. And the gentleman, I actually do think, I think actually the person that funded it was Eiffel, Charles Eiffel, I believe. And that's why it's named Eiffel Tower, but it was designed for that. Originally, they didn't think that they would actually keep it up for beyond the World's Fair. It became obviously a huge landmark and a huge centerpiece of the French culture, so they kept it. The very top of it, there was an apartment that was lived in for a number of years, and then now at the top, they do use it, I believe, as an antenna signal for actually the fan of Paris, the radio station.
Yeah.
They're on. You can get it. They had some problems with some of the construction areas, so then they had to pick up another frequency. So 93.5 and 107.5 in Paris launched from the top of the Eiffel Tower.
The guess is always the World's Fair. Whenever it's stuff like that, it's always
That's
the
correct.
World's Fair.
You're right.
Yep.
Where did the Ferris wheel come from? What about
World's
the
Fair,
ice cream cone?
Yep.
All courtesy of the World's Fair. Again, Franciscan Health, by the way, thank you for the Feel Good for the Heart Fridays. And if you have somebody that you would like to submit, in particular, a high school athlete, and one that is overcoming odds or one that simply you are proud of, you can always send me a text at 317-523-9288. That's 317-523-9288. My email as well, as I tell people all the time, my two favorite people, jakequery@me.com. We have a radio station one, but it's easier. Probably just remember jakequery@me.com, my email. I would love for your submissions, and we always thank Franciscan Health. Speaking of great sponsors like Franciscan, Greenfield Signs is one of them. They bring you Jimmy's Plays of the Day, and we will do that next.
Today's plays of the day are brought to you by the fine folks at Greenfield Signs and Lighting. Greenfield Signs is a professional, comprehensive sign company. 2 locations in central Indiana. They'll take your signage ideas, take hold of the project from design to delivery. You can always put importance on a lasting first impression being made when working with Greenfield Signs and Lighting. We'll start with the Olympics still going on in Paris. Yes, Jake, we do have some obscure sports on the docket today. Actually, for the weekend is where the real obscure sports lie. We'll start first in the pool. The U.S. mixed 4x100 meter swimming medley relay. We will take Team USA to win gold outright there. That takes place today at 3:58. We have some baseball bets for today, but we'll get to those in a second just in case Eddie has some. We'll instead fast forward to the weekend where Olympics are abound. Early morning on Saturday, we will take the USA 8-man rowing team to win the gold medal, that at plus 100 odds. A little bit later.
Now who's the favorite in that? Do we know
they
who's
are
the favorite in the rowing
but
team?
It's very close. It's between them and Great Britain. Shout out to the USA 4-man rowing team. They won gold for the first time since 1960. Earlier.
Did you hear about? I tried to watch the British team in their native waters. But you know what happened, right?
What was that?
Wrong channel.
Eddie was ready to go for that one as well.
Eddie, where was that sort of punctuality on the button earlier in the show?
What are you talking about?
The action shifts from the pool to the track as we have Olympic sprints ongoing. Sha'Carri Richardson at Team USA is the best women's sprinter in the world. She's minus 370. You can bet that she's going to win, but those odds are a little bit too high for our liking. So we'll instead head to the men's side. Noah Lyles of Team USA, he's minus 125 odds to win the 100-meter dash. We will take him to win that outright. Cathedral's own Cole Hocker in the 1,500-meter race, that taking place tomorrow. We'll take him to win a medal. That is plus 175. Last Olympic bet for you, U.S. women's soccer in a knockout match against Japan. We'll take them to win on the money line. So we're not laying big juice for them to win outright. They're going to win in regular time over Japan. That taking place tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. Baseball, we'll take the Baltimore Orioles.
Hey, root for me. Better known as Cute Fella. Yeah,
to bounce back against the Cleveland Guardians. That in Cleveland tonight, first pitch 7:10. We'll take Baltimore on the money line. Last one
I think
for
we're
you.
Done with the Olympic music, right?
Yeah, I mean,
done with the Olympics?
we have to keep it consistently because
Okay.
it's just the vibe of this segment as a whole deserves the Olympic theme. We'll lay 1.5 on the Minnesota Twins. Eddie, who are they playing?
I don't know.
They're playing the Chicago White Sox naturally. We'll continue to try to ride that choo-choo train, which means if you've been fading me, the White Sox losing streak will finally come to an end today. But I'm like 1.5 on the run line for the Minnesota Twins. Eddie, any bets for you?
I will take under 9 in the Reds game today. Got 2 lefties. They're facing off against the Giants. Blake Snell in the round. Reds have struggled against lefties, and Blake Snell's starting to look more like Blake Snell, so I'll take under 9 there. And by the way, Leon Marchand is just incredible.
Yep.
Really good.
An Olympic run.
JMV just walked in, and John, I don't know if you missed it or not, but apparently we are placing wagers on Mongolian rodeo.
Oh, we great,
Yeah.
great. Well, I'm sure we all very understood. Somebody's going to have to tell me, Jimmy. You probably would know what U.S. soccer team. What was that?
He asked the same question. It's basically your under.
Do
Your
they
22s
suck
and
like
unders.
all the other
your
ones do?
22s and unders.
Why do they suck so bad?
They made their first Olympic game since 2008, and they made their first quarterfinal since 2000. So it
Now,
could
John,
be some extent viewed as a win for them.
They
but
got beat 4-0
They
by
did get killed by
stinking
Morocco.
Morocco.
you got to say nil. You
Huh?
can't say
he did
nothing.
say
I
no.
said,
He
I
said,
know.
I said
I was
no.
proud of him. It's not. I told Jake if this is a similar outcome in 2 years when it's the big boys in the World Cup, then we can all bash soccer. But this was other men's programs
I think
around
you
the
can
world
bash
do not.
soccer for that
I
type
mean,
of effort.
You probably
Yeah.
can, but like no one in other countries care about men's Olympic soccer. They're not
Well,
sending
they
their
must.
best
They
players.
just beat the United States.
I'm just
4-0.
telling you culturally, like if you ask somebody in
That's all
France
the more
if they
reason
care
that
about.
the United States should be good if
I'm
everybody
not
else is throwing in the
disagreeing.
towel.
I'm not disagreeing
That's a
with
lame
you on that.
argument.
I'm not disagreeing
well,
with
they
you
don't
on
even
that.
have grass in Morocco. What the hell do they play on in Morocco? They don't have grass, do they?
I mean, here's the thing. But what
if we line it underneath the prism of U.S. soccer sucks and they'll always suck, well, then you're not going to – there's no middle ground to be met. I'm telling
you
that –
can't use the excuse or the reasoning of, well, the reason they lost is because the other countries don't care. Well, that's all the more reason we should –
I'm not saying that's the reason they lost. I'm saying you can't judge this as another failure for the men's national team when it's their youth club.
It's every team's youth club, right?
It's the youth club,
right?
It
is, but you can't say, hey, Christian Pulisic, way to lose in Paris. Well, he wasn't on the team. They're two different sections of U.S. soccer.
No, so why does U.S. soccer suck as bad as it does?
Great question, John.
Why is it? Who was the coach? Because they fired, what's his name?
Yeah, and Berhalter wouldn't have been the coach of this team anyway.
Right.
I don't know who the head coach is of the U.S. youth national team, but it would not have been Berhalter even if he was still the coach.
It's just funny, man. Remember, Jake, in basketball in 1988, John Thompson, a storied head coach, blanked around and messed that thing up and embarrassed us, and then that's when they went to the dream team.
Wasn't that the team that had, it was like Ricky Berry and Willie Anderson and...
He had on, who was the guard?
Curtis Ellison might have been there.
He had on that team his own guard from Georgetown.
Correct.
Charles Smith, right? Is that who it was?
That's right.
The other Charles Smith? And he was terrible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That team, that I remember when they got beat, I mean, that was just an absolute unthinkable sin, right? And it was like, okay, well, that's it. We're done with that. And you can thank John Thompson for the dream team, basically.
So Dean Garrett and Keith Smart, they were not.
They were the Pan Am team.
They're Pan Am team.
They were on the Pan Am team. They got beat by
too.
Oscar Schmidt.
Yeah.
Oscar Schmidt dropped 42 on them. I think they finished sixth that year.
I guess what I'm saying here, Jimmy, is we saw that when things didn't go well for basketball, they did something about it to make sure it goes well. And can they just not do something about soccer to make sure that it can go well?
They would have to change the entire body of rules of men's soccer because you can only send three over 23-year-old athletes. Like what Team USA did in '92 was they sent NBA players and high level. You couldn't do that. You have to fundamentally change the rules.
But nobody
of
else
soccer.
can either, right?
Correct.
So why
they were a top 8 country. Like they made a quarterfinal.
Why is the rest of the world caught up in basketball the way they have, but we haven't caught up in soccer?
We were talking about that.
The rest
Pay
of the
for
world.
play has a lot to do with that. There's a lot of layers to why we have not. I want them to be in the same breath as England and Spain and France. Right now, they're in the same breath as Morocco and other countries.
Not even Morocco's breath.
I mean, making a quarterfinal for the first time in 24 years is an accomplishment for Team USA.
So you lose 4-0 to Morocco, and it's an accomplishment?
It all depends if we're just great. It's like people getting mad at the gymnastics team for celebrating a bronze medal the other day. It depends where your cultural line is. If all you're celebrating is gold, you're never going to be happy.
I think actually the inaccuracy of our strikers in soccer comes from the fact that they keep moving the goalpost, right?
Was that it?
Is that probably what it
Might
is?
be, yeah.
John, what do you got lined up for the program?
We're gonna do a lot of Colts conversation coming up. Andrew Nemhard had an outstanding game for Canada, and hopefully answered a lot of the questions around here. Whether or not, he's just a 1. He can't be a 1 if Halliburton's here. And I keep trying to remind people you need basketball players. He's a basketball player. He's a hooper. That's what's going to matter. He showed that earlier today. We'll talk about that and a bunch of other crap. And I'm not going to rip on soccer or anything like that. I just kind of wondered because Jimmy's much more educated on that than I am. That's why I ask.
That is true. Yep. All right, John is up next. We will be with you live from Grand Park at Colts Camp on Monday. Have a wonderful weekend, and we will talk to you at noon on Monday from Colts Camp. Thanks for listening to Aquarium Company.